In medical news this week, scientists report there may soon be a vaccine for drug addicts, which completely eliminates the craving for cocaine. They caution, however, that the vaccine is extremely dangerous, highly addictive, and costs $10,000 a gram. This week at the O.J. Simpson trial, the infamous bloody glove was finally introduced into evidence, and O.J. didn't help his case any by blurting out, "There it is, I've been looking all over for that thing." In a bid to boost low attendance, officials at the New Jersey State Aquarium have announced plans for a $4 million facelift. In addition, flashing neon signs will be placed outside the aquarium stating that the fish are, quote, all nude all the time. Julia Roberts told reporters this week that her marriage to Lyle Lovett has been over for some time. The key moment, she said, came when she realized that she was Julia Roberts and that she was married to Lyle Lovett. Well, singer Willie Nelson, who was arrested recently in Texas for marijuana possession, saw the charges against him dropped this week. A judge ruled the arrest had been illegal because police didn't have probable cause to search his car for pot. How about the fact he's Willie Nelson? Well, the magazine POV came out this week with a list of the best and worst jobs to have in the next century. Their three best were, in this order, multimedia software designer, management consultant, and interactive advertising executive. While their worst, for the third year in a row, crack whore.
Norm Macdonald could always get a laugh out of crack whore. All right, welcome everyone to Read Out. I'm your host, James, and joining me as per our usual arrangement, we have Just John. I guess you've lost the new.
I know, just John now.
There you go. Well, you know, you're here for a few weeks and
transitioned fully.
You're officially John, but just John. And Professor McCoy is joining us again for a second time. So in our rotating third chair here. So happy to have you both. I'll let you introduce yourselves in just one second. But first, tonight we have Jesus and Whatnot versus Jay Dyer on the Filioque. We're going to be talking about the holy fire scandal in Orthodoxy. And it'll be interesting to have a Catholic's perspective on that as well. We'll be also reviewing Bertuzzi's video on it. And also Tony Fauci, who is famous for saying that he is the science, is apparently also morality. So that man, he is ontologically complicated. He has a lot of weight in the.
I feel like I remember a certain snake telling people that they'll be like God, knowing
exactly.
Tony
Fauci apparently just is God. All righty. Well, lots to get to. But before we get to all of that, John, how are you doing tonight?
Doing all right. I got a new car, which was not as exciting as it sounds because the old one died and now I'm in debt, but that's okay because it's like the only debt I have.
There you go. Yep. If all you got is a car payment, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
And what are you drinking tonight, sir?
Cheap Arizona green tea. This is spiked. This is their spiked version with vodka in it.
Outstanding. Well, at least it's something hard, which is unusual for my compatriots here. Professor McCoy, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you.
All right. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking another Rob Roy. It's a Scotch and Drambuie cocktail. Good thing.
It's a good
little nice coffee because I'm not used to being up late anymore, but I can tonight. So
excellent. Yeah, I might need to get some coffee at some point tonight.
I am drinking in the background.
What's that?
Yeah, there's a couple of little McCoys over there somewhere.
It's a lot more than a couple. A proper bundle.
Okay, to be fair, the two of them are with their grandparents tonight.
Okay.
So there's only 3 at home tonight. So
fair.
You still might hear them though. They're around.
I know they're
populating the earth. I see we have the other Paul in the audience. Glad to be with you. Glad we can be part of your morning. You are on the wrong side of the hemisphere, but that's okay. We won't hold that against you. We appreciate you being with us. And Mr. Matthew Dropko, thank you very much. Good to have you here. I am currently drinking Johnny Walker Gold Label. It's my first time trying the Gold Label, and it's been good so far. Although, I will say, I we'll probably switch to this later. And this is one that I highly recommend. This is Stranahan's, and it is like a Scotch imitation. It's made in the Midwest, it's made in Denver, Colorado. And it is
Midwest.
no, indeed. But it's quite good. It's a single malt whiskey, so it, like I said, it's kind of imitating Scotch. It's obviously not truly Scotch because it's not from Scotland, but it is a very good single malt whiskey, and I would put it up against a lot of the Scotches that I enjoy. So one to try out, and on the like $60 a bottle side of things, so not terribly expensive, but I think it punches above its weight class. All right. Well, let's. We've got so much to get to tonight. I'm going to skip over kind of opening remarks, and we'll just move right into the clips. The first one that we are doing is...
Actually, real quick, this is a very, very short super chat, so we'll pop this up before we get into theme.
Well, there we go. Yes, Mr. Matthew dropped
$1.99, not much, but something. We really appreciate it.
We're so glad to be part of your day. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. So the first thing we're going to cover is silly, but is profitable, I think, in the analysis. So this is going to be, where did I have that? There we go. I'm not sure exactly when this happened. James looks rather young in this. This was posted recently, but I can't imagine this was a particularly recent event.
I think they mentioned 2013 somewhere in the video.
Yeah, so I know it was like 12, 13 years ago, something like that.
Good Lord, 2013 was...
I remember this discussion. I remember watching this discussion.
So this is a fun little talk. For those of you who don't know, KJV only is a mostly dying breed, but there are still some of them walking around. And the idea is that the King James version, based on the Textus Receptus, is the inspired word of God in English as it was written, almost like the Muslim idea that the Quran in the original text in Arabic is sort of holy in its special way. Well, they kind of see that about the English version of the King James version. And despite its known sort of errors and potential inaccuracies when you get into even just the lower text criticism of it. But they really take it as a precept of faith that you start with Sola Scriptura, specifically the King James Version. And James White has been very critical of that, James White being a bit of a warrior in the field of text criticism and just in general in debating. James White will debate literally anything, is what it seems like. He's done so many debates over time, some worse than others, and there are many things that I do not agree with James White on, but occasionally he really does hit the nail on the head. So let's go ahead and roll tape.
So let me ask you this. Okay, the NIV uses the term Hades 8 times because the term Hades is used 10 times in the Greek New Testament. 8 times they translate it as Hades, or transliterate it as Hades. They leave it untranslated as Hades. Okay. 2 times they change it to something completely different, the grave. Okay, and that is in Acts chapter 2 about Jesus Christ, because in Jesus Christ it says, he was not abandoned to the grave, neither did his flesh see corruption. In the King James, in Acts 2:31, the Bible says, this spake he of the resurrection of Christ, that his soul was not left in hell, neither did his flesh see corruption. So in the King James, if I'm going to be King James only, if I'm going to believe that the King James is my final authority, then I believe that Jesus Christ's soul was in hell for 3 days and 3 nights. Now,
which... fair enough. I just think it's hilarious that you want to be King James only. It's like, yeah, I guess if you're going to be King James only, and we'll get in a second where he actually starts doing like text analysis, where he's saying, the number of times you see this particular usage of the word Hades or hell in the King James Bible, it always means this. Therefore, in this case, it means this as well. And it's like, sure, but you're doing a level of text criticism that's one step removed from the original text, where clearly you had 2 separate words and they just both had to be translated as hell in the King James Version. But you're right. If you're going to be King James only and see that as your foundational postulate, then I guess you're right. I guess that's what all you can do is all you can do is do text criticism on the English translation of Scripture.
Isn't it in either case? Isn't it still translating Hades though? Isn't it, or is it separated? Is it separate Hades Gehenna?
I think it's Hades Gehenna. I don't know. I forget exactly what they were just talking about, but both I think get it translated hell, and that's where a lot of the distinction comes in this particular conversation.
If I'm reading the NIV, I'm not going to get that. I'm just going to think we're talking about only the bodily aspect of his body coming out of the grave, not the fact that his soul came out of hell. Let me ask this. Do you believe that Jesus' soul went to hell?
Hades, not hell. Hades had 2 compartments.
Yeah, I don't believe that.
It's a fact.
Okay, what if I show you what if I show you Old Testament scriptures of the saved being in heaven?
Read the Jewish scriptures. Read
Whoa,
the
Jewish
Jew,
scriptures.
I'm sorry.
What?
Read what the Jews themselves understood at the time of Jesus. When
The
Jesus,
ones who crucified him?
No. When Jesus,
Read what they understood.
Yeah. What you don't think that's relevant?
It is funny. You do hear these kinds of arguments in other debates often. They'll be like, you reference some kind of historical fact that happens to include Judaism, and be like, whoa, we're talking about Jews
even
now?
Funnier. Yeah. It's even funnier when he uses that same remark to Catholics, because whenever anyone mentions Romans, I've seen him say also, oh, the ones who crucified him.
I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
He's technically correct.
Our sins are what drive the nails into the cross. Yeah,
Yeah,
we get
true.
that.
Yeah. The Old Testament.
They didn't understand Christ's message.
So
why do I expect them to understand anything else? Just make this clear real quick. We have a fundamental difference in doctrine here. I believe that Jesus Christ was in a place, his soul was in a place of fire. 4 mentions of hell, it's always a bad place. It's always fire and torment. Then that, I cannot believe anything other than that.
So when Jesus said to the thief, today you will be with me in paradise.
Right.
That was hell?
No, because the thief is going to be with the Father in heaven, and that
Jesus
speaks
isn't
to
gonna,
the
today you will be with me in paradise.
That speaks to the Trinity. Jesus was dead for 3 days and 3 nights.
Okay.
And here's the thing. Okay.
All right. Anyway, that's enough of that. But I just think it's hilarious because it's like if you start from bad presuppositions, you will, by necessity, get to bad conclusions. And those conclusions might be correct in terms of the presuppositions. Like you might have done the logic right. Or even in this case, it's not, pure necessity, logical, syllogistic type argument. But even the analysis based on those presuppositions, it kind of follows. If you're going to do text criticism on the English translation of the King James Bible, then sure, you're going to end up with those conclusions, and you might end up with some wacky conclusions. And this is where I would encourage people, when you're faced with the reality of the rest of experience, if your conclusions seem to get you into some wacky places, like completely ignoring the fact that Hades and Gehenna are different concepts that probably shouldn't be translated exactly the same, and you're just completely waving that away because of your presuppositions, then maybe you should challenge your presuppositions. So I just think it's a great example of how you see someone following their presuppositions to the natural conclusion and then being smacked in the face with reality as it appears, and how I think that would be a good time to reassess your presuppositions.
It's interesting, I think, that what we left off on, James's point, that James,
the other James,
James White's point about the thief on the cross. Today you will be with me in paradise. But he also admits that Jesus did not go directly to paradise. He went to Hades. He went to hell, if we're going to use the catch-all term. So if he's going to insist on that as his point, then that goes against his own argument just as much as it does against Stephen's.
Well, I'm not sure. You'd have to elaborate, because I'm not sure exactly what James White's view on that is. Are you just implying that it implies like purgatory or something along those lines?
No. Okay. So to explain something like the Catholic position here, it's embarrassingly perhaps closer to Stephen's King James only version than it is to James White's version. Which is outlined more or less straightforwardly in the Apostles' Creed, which I think they mention at some point in this discussion, which is that Jesus descended into hell, and it's intended in both senses of that term, right? Not just the place of the dead, but the place of the damned, and it is there that 2 things happen. One, Satan's power, or the power of death, is expended upon Christ. And it is not able to overcome him completely and thoroughly, and he raises from the dead and ascends into heaven. And then also the harrowing of hell which is the calling of those who are dead to join with Christ in his ascent to heaven.
Mhm.
And so both
Now,
of these
and when you
involve
say hell
descent
there,
into
you mean not like the eternal fire, but like some in between place?
it's
Or
both. It's
Okay.
both, right? Or at least it's either both or it's ambiguous. Let's put it
Okay.
that way. I don't think there is dogma saying that it necessarily has to be one or the other or both, but it's typically common and permitted theological opinion in the Catholic Church that it intends both Hades and Gehenna, if we're using those terms.
So what would be the implication? Is he getting people out of the eternal fire, or what is meant by harrowing?
So harrowing is getting people out of Hades,
Right.
and Christ's descent into Gehenna, into the eternal fire, is the point that the eternal fire does not consume him because he's God.
Okay. Gotcha.
And it's the sort of defeat of death.
Understood.
motif
But he's
that
not
Christmas
getting
would
anyone
try to
out of the eternal fire.
Right. There's implications in some of the church fathers, if I'm remembering right. I can't remember who. But that distinction only really became significant and a hardline distinction at the resurrection of Christ, after the harrowing of hell, because before then it really was Hades, and there was an eternal fire prepared for the damned, but they hadn't gone into it yet until they rejected Christ during those 3 days. Again, that's not dogma or anything, but it's a relatively common, relatively early theological opinion.
Going back to what James was saying about the two compartments of Hades, we actually see that in Luke with the parable of rich man and Lazarus.
Right.
Well, the story, it's debatable whether it's a parable or a story of a real person. It's kind of hard to tell because it's the only parable with a named character.
True.
Yeah. Right. Well,
So I that's always been my view of like, where do we go? Like when we die is probably something more akin to Abraham's bosom, because like the new heavens and the new earth is not until the end. But I'd have to double check on all that.
I find it all very speculative and extremely hard to dogmatize.
Well, and it's just like it's one of those things that you can get hung up on, but there's like no point. It's not productive to get hung up on it.
Yeah, it seems to be one of the less productive areas of speculation. It's
and if we're looking to sort of Jewish theological tradition, that changed a lot over the course of the Old Testament as well. What the idea was between the torments of hellfire versus a place of awaiting the Messiah, whether it was a place of simply, what would you say, sort of impersonal existence as part of the people of God, but not anything we would think of as the beatific vision or anything. It changed a lot depending on what time period you're looking at in sort of Old Testament history as well.
Yeah, no, it's something that I'd be interested to study more, and even just to study the distinctives between the Protestant, the Eastern and Western distinctives, and then Protestant and Catholic distinctives there, which isn't the topic of today's video, but would be interesting to go more into. But it is, it's still funny to see the analysis and the way that he's conducting this, which I think it's just totally flawed presuppositions. So again, I think that's a good case for an inductive argument. Should challenge your presuppositions and make you rethink.
If the King James English was good enough for Jesus, then it should be good enough for us.
Exactly.
Jesus spoke English.
Yeah,
and probably technically true.
Yeah,
well,
he
knows it now.
He would understand English were it spoken to him at the time. Let's go with that.
Yeah,
there we go.
When you visit Jesus in your time machine, and he's like, "What are you doing here? Go back to your own time, idiot!" Like, I ordained these things for a reason, moron. You just crawl back to your time machine with your tail between your legs.
Yeah, do you guys think Jesus, as he walked 2,000 years ago, would have understood, higher level calculus?
I mean, presumably. I think he'd be like, "This isn't my ministry. What are you doing? Get out of here."
Yeah, I think it would be something more like implicit knowledge.
Yeah.
which is the idea of how the divine omnipotence was within the human nature of Christ, or expressed within the human nature of Christ, was a kind of implicit knowledge that he would immediately recognize something when it was when it came to him, when it was brought before him, but not that he had it as a current belief or a current knowledge. Like how else would he learn to walk, right?
Yeah.
Or learn Aramaic?
Well, what do you mean? I mean, I assume he learned to walk and learned Aramaic the same way that we all do.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
He was probably better at learning it than
Yeah,
we
exactly.
were.
Right.
That's
He's
all.
probably better, but he came by it the natural way. And this doesn't really challenge his omniscience. I mean, the person of Christ is omniscient, but in his human nature, he does seem to give up a certain amount of his omniscience. I think that's the technically correct way of saying this. You always get, I always walk with fear and trembling whenever I try to say anything.
His divine omniscience is
precise,
limited by his
but-
human nature or something like that.
Yeah, something along those lines.
But
yeah.
don't say that in those words exactly.
No,
because
yeah,
one
I was about to
accuses
say, I
me of
don't
heresy
know
for it
that's-
because of the divine nature being limited. Yeah,
Exactly.
The
No, but
incarnational theology is really hard.
Right, exactly. But yes, I don't think
What
it's...
is a hypostatic union? I don't even know.
All right. So moving on now to our the main topic, one of two main topics today, and we've got several other little things peppered in.
We're gonna move on.
But
Let's hit this super chat really quick.
okay, go for it.
Yeah. One of my favorite streams, unfortunately, I'll be part of the replay gang. That's okay. I actually do more replays of live streams, like Inspiring Philosophy. I almost exclusively watch replays. I just don't have time. Like, he streams at weird hours, and because of my work, I have to pause and play a lot, so I don't have time. Anyway, EBT_enjoyer, thank you so much for the 10. You have a blessed evening.
We do appreciate
Leave
you,
some
sir.
fun comment. Leave some fun comments on the replay.
Most podcasters, myself included, speak too slowly for me, so I'm usually replay gang at 1.5, 2 times speed, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Fair enough. All right. Let's go ahead and hit this. So this probably doesn't need an introduction. I assume most of you at least saw the headlines if you haven't seen the actual debate itself. But Jesus and Whatnot, this character, we have talked about him before in the context of a conversation he had with Christian B. Wagner on whether or not you should pray with Protestants, which I might ask you that question, Professor McCoy, in a second. But that's not the topic for today. He called into Jay Dyer, as I have done many times, and the result was, I suppose, predictable, but somehow, from what I have heard, this will be a live reaction from me, but from what I have heard, even more shameful than usual. But that's, I suppose that's a prejudgment from me. But you guys both have seen this already, right?
Yeah.
Sadly.
Well, I saw this clip. I didn't see any.
I listened to the
context.
whole. I listened to all 25 minutes on the way home from work today, and
Well, that's part of the idea of not watching it ahead of time, because I wasn't sure that I would want to watch it twice. Sorry to put you through that.
I anticipate having a good time both times.
That's
what the whiskey's for.
That's right. It does make it more
drink
interesting.
more, but I do still have to get up early and hit the
What
gym
is
tomorrow.
work? Stop working. You ever considered
Brother, I would love
Quitting?
to unemployed Max.
It's,
I would love
life
to
is sweet.
unemployed
You just
Max.
smoke cigars and drink whiskey after
Yeah,
5,
and then
but
and then like some guys keep showing up at your door saying, "Hey, give me my money. Your bills are late." And then your electricity stops working for some reason.
somehow
have no
I
idea.
still pay the bills, but it, you know,
Gotta get the whiskey money somehow.
exactly. All right, it motivates you. I'll tell you what.
One of his live streams using an
Sound check. Can you
anonymous
guys hear?
account.
Yeah, we're good.
All right.
And when I got up on this anonymous account, I told him that I wanted to discuss the Filioque with him, and he was very open to this idea. Now, the reason I used an anonymous account is because, obviously, if I went up using my Jesus and Whatnot account, he would recognize me and try and start debating something that wasn't the Filioque. But I really wanted to talk to him about specifically the Filioque. So I joined using this anonymous
This is what we call foreshadowing.
account, and we start having this really good discussion, and I'm bringing forth logical arguments. I'm attempting to bring forth the fathers, and he's open to this at first. You can tell in the beginning of the debate, he's really trying to engage with my logical arguments. He even tells me that he wants me to bring forward fathers, which is going to be really important later in the debate. But you can see there's a certain point somewhere in the debate where he realizes that he doesn't know the answer to some of the questions that I'm asking. Maybe it's because he didn't understand, or he just didn't have a proper response at the time. And he absolutely flips. He tells me that he's no longer going to have this discussion or that he wants to talk about the paradigm now. He literally says, I'm moving the discussion to talk about paradigms. And he starts talking about my epistemology. And so eventually I just say, hey, Jay, I am willing to take on your epistemology. I will take your worldview and do an internal critique. And his response to that was just, well, I don't accept St. Thomas's theology, so you can't do that. And I thought that was absolutely ridiculous because you can watch the entire debate. Jay never responds to any of the points that I brought up. And that was very disappointing for me to experience. But hopefully you guys enjoy this debate and you'll even see me get kicked off of the stream, which is just a Jay Dyer classic at this point. So thank you guys for watching and God bless.
You can pause it right here.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
You don't actually need to watch the rest of this video. That is exactly what happened. That's it.
That's the video.
That's the whole. They're like the problem. He calls this a debate. This isn't a debate. This is just 25 minutes of Jay Dyer shouting at Jesus and whatnot that he doesn't agree with Thomism. That nothing of substance is said, and Jesus and whatnot literally doesn't even get a chance to
Spoiler
say
alert!
anything.
Come on, man. How am I going to enjoy this now?
I am certainly interested in taking a look at his sort of presuppositionalism.
Well, we'll have fun
Which-
talking about that because that's my hobby horse. So
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna start
Yeah, sorry.
start saying it every time you talk about Pag.
I was hoping to maybe have a conversation about the Filioque with you if you're interested.
Okay.
Yeah. So obviously I'm a Thomist because the whole Catholic thing.
I love how he dropped his voice a couple octaves just to make him sound different and sound a little more masculine.
Can't be recognized.
Yeah, and I take the stance of Gary Gou-Lagrange. Obviously, I believe you can't distinguish the persons without the Filioque, Son and Spirit. But I wanted to take a slightly different approach from arguing from.
Did the Cappadocian? Can you tell me how the Cappadocians distinguish the persons?
Yeah, well, we have some that talk about relative opposition. We can get into that. But that's not my main argument. Like, obviously, that's something.
That's not what I argued. Relations of opposition is not relative opposition. They're two different things.
Yeah, and again, we can get into that maybe later if you want. But right now, I just wanted to run an argument by you and hear your thoughts on it.
Well, can I ask you before you run your argument, do you agree with Aquinas and Summa Contra Gentiles that he seems to speak as if the essence also generates and spirates?
Yeah, no, I agree that the essence is the principle by which I would say it's the principium quo remotum, but I wouldn't say that the essence is the principium quod as in the Father and the Son.
Okay. Well, how about let's just talk about the theophanies because that's more relevant. Do you think the theophanies are creatures?
Well, I just want to run my argument by you real quick.
Are the theophanies creatures? Though? 'Cause
Orthodox try and talk about anything without Theophanes challenge level impossible.
the kill shot for Thomism.
Yeah, well,
Orthodox
I
give
mean,
a straight
I'm not
answer,
too well
challenge
versed in that.
level
I just wanted to
impossible.
run an argument. It's similar. It's a pretty basic Thomistic argument. It's not really like. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on it. Really, we don't need to like go back and forth too long on it.
Oh, so you don't want to talk about the actual kill shot for Thomism?
Well,
I think it's a disservice. I think it's a disservice.
Oh, I don't want to talk about the
impression
actual
that you
kill
guys
shot.
actually
All right,
have
whatever,
this, like,
buddy.
high-tiered.
Yeah, if I remember right, if I'm remembering the clip correctly, he never actually gets to his argument.
Does he really? No, I was about to say, when
No.
does he get to actually stating the argument?
Never. Not
Good
not
grief.
at all.
Oh my goodness. All
Have you
right.
not
He
watched?
doesn't get
Did you not watch this video ahead of time, James?
No, I said this is gonna be a live reaction.
Oh,
I
okay,
haven't seen
all right.
it. Yeah.
way to account for this and that when your whole position falls apart if you don't believe that God can be in space and time.
yeah, and again, like we could totally debate theophanies. I could come on a different live,
Wait.
but I just had a specific argument I was hoping to ask you about. Like, and if you want to say, hey, that's a stupid argument, that's totally cool. I just kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on it because I've never actually heard like an Orthodox opinion.
I will answer your question that you run when you answer, if you answer some of mine as well.
Yeah, okay, sure, we can totally do that.
Go ahead.
Hold on. Okay, hold on.
So
hold on.
are the Theophanes creatures?
Is Jay arguing that God is in space and time, and that's why there is a distinction to be made between the persons because it's a spatio-temporal distinction?
No,
And that's the kill shot against Thomism?
look, I don't really. I have not done my research on the essence energies distinction, but Jay would say that basically solves the metaphysical mysteries around how God could prior to the incarnation appear in these theophanies, and perhaps maybe even solve some incarnational mysteries as well. I'm not sure exactly how far they take it, but that's the play that he's running. And like I said, I haven't done enough research on this to really know the arguments for and against, and divine simplicity versus the essence synergy distinction. That's something I'm very interested in, but I have not actually looked into it yet, and it's a little bit beyond my general sphere of research. So that's the play he's running. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that? Is that something you're familiar with?
I'm not. Okay, so I don't actually understand the essence energies distinction. I've
don't think
read
you're
some
Orthodox,
explanations thereof. I don't frankly get it. It's one of those theological philosophical points that I have tried to understand but have failed. So maybe someday I will get it. Or maybe, unlikely as this might be, maybe it doesn't make sense. That's possible. But
It's quite possible.
I'm going
Now,
to assume that it's me.
I think it's interesting. I think it does a lot for the Orthodox theology, and I think Jay is right to make it such a fulcrum for his epistemology, because it seems to be at the center of his worldview, and specifically even the way he runs TAG. He would say that the reason why TAG points his version of presuppositionalism points specifically to the Orthodox religion is because it's the only religion and only brand of Christianity, apart from, I guess, some sort of Eastern schismatic breakoffs, that has this distinction. And so that's why, he would say through his analysis of the metaphysics, it's the only one that actually allows for all these transcendental categories, whereas the divine simplicity model does not actually get you to all of these transcendental categories. It does not. It precludes the possibility of true knowledge and love and morality,
Right,
and all those sorts of things.
And I mean, I'm 100% in the divine simplicity camp, just because I'm independently convinced of divine simplicity, and not just for traditional reasons, but for philosophical and theological reasons. I think that metaphysics largely falls apart without divine simplicity. So more for philosophical reasons in that case.
I'm basically with you, right? I've read Boethius. I've read,
Yeah.
Augustine comes to very similar conclusions, and I'm in that camp, but I also take some caution at the proverb that you read one side and it seems correct until you hear the other. So, not having studied the essence energies, that's where I want to be very slow to criticize it. And as I understand it, Gregory Palamas was a bit of a genius, and kind of is the guy who allowed for Orthodoxy to really catch up in terms of their philosophical culture. Now I feel like it kind of slowed down after that, and maybe even just sort of stayed in place ever since. But that is, that's kind of how the story goes. And so, I'm sure he's a genius, and I'm sure he had a lot of cool things to say, worth reading at some point, but not something that I've done the full homework on. I have not yet earned my opinion on that topic. But it does seem preposterous on its face that every argument has to go back to this metaphysical concept.
I get that. I actually really do get that, because I tend to be really sympathetic to attempts to do that sort of thing, to have this kind of really foundational, fundamental basis in a very few really important principles. But again, for me, maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's divine simplicity as one of those foundational points. A lot of my research, my academic research, is on the transcendentals, and specifically what the doctrine of the convertibility of the transcendentals can do for issues of applied ethics, of metaphysics, of metaethics, of
the convertibility of the transcendentals. What does that mean?
Yes, so it is that truth, goodness, and beauty. Beauty is controversial. Aquinas didn't think it was transcendental, but truth and goodness, at least, are identical to being itself at their utmost. So as it is typified in God, God's being is identical with truth and with goodness, and if you ask anyone but Aquinas, beauty as well. And so what this does for example, this forms the basis for almost all pre-modern metaethics, by having goodness and being coincide. To say that something is is to say that it is good insofar as it is. And so to say that something ought to be a certain way is to say that it ought to be what it is. And so this is how you
bridge the is-ought gap.
Well, how you end run it, right?
It's a leap.
The is-ought gap was never a problem. It was never even thought of as a problem before the sort of discarding of the medieval synthesis.
Right.
That's why this only really came up. This is why a lot of I'm following Alistair McIntyre here, who was brilliant on this subject of his book After Virtue, especially, where he gets into this point that we find ourselves in an odd situation where in the modern philosophical context, we have invented a whole lot of these problems that we think of as the sort of perennial problems of philosophy that are really distinctively modern problems that are a result of rejecting the what's called the medieval synthesis. So the synthesis between Athens and Jerusalem, the Greek tradition and the Christian tradition coming together.
Would you say
that's
Would you describe that synthesis as also the synthesis of faith and reason, or is that a separate synthesis? I have an opinion on this, but I'm just curious
So McIntyre specifically talks about a philosophical tradition. So it's strictly talking about the reason aspect of it, but it's the same. It's the same kind of fusion that you see in between faith and reason, right? Questions of opposition of faith and reason also didn't show up until the sort of post-Enlightenment period as well. Even
I feel like you see at least articulations of the question of faith and reason, at least as far back as like Boethius, where it feels like that's the problem that he's trying to tackle. Now, maybe he's just using those words to refer to different concepts.
Different than we would mean it, right?
Yeah.
So for Boethius, when he's talking about reason, he's talking about merely human reason. And when he's talking about faith, he's talking about divine testimony or something like that.
Right.
So it's more like natural versus revealed theology.
Exactly.
Right. And that's not what we typically mean when we talk about, faith and reason being opposed in the modern context.
Well, it does seem to be how some people refer to it. Some people kind of do seem to think of faith as being the things that we can learn from special revelation, and reason is all the stuff that we can do through our natural sciences or sort of our natural theology. I don't think that's the right dichotomy, but it does. You see echoes of that throughout even this medieval conversation, it feels like. And then some people in the postmodern sense will also kind of keep the same vocabulary, even though our epistemology and our metaphysics has just sort of completely turned on its head. You'll still see echoes of that distinction or that usage of the terms faith and reason, which again I completely disregard. I think that those are that's the wrong semantic usage.
Yeah, I think you've convinced me to put some Boethius in my syllabus this semester because they're messing around with my master syllabus and so I'm technically teaching a religious studies course this semester rather than a philosophy of religion course. So it's titled Faith and Reason rather than the old title, which was Faith and Philosophical Inquiry. But it's still based on John Paul II's encyclical Fides et Ratio. But yeah, I'm thinking throwing some consolation in philosophy in there might be a good.
It's a short work. It's a good read. You can just leave out all the poetry, and it actually shortens it in half.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
It's a really short read at that point.
What part isn't poetry? There's parts that
it has
poetry?
some explicit poetry. Yeah, it is kind of sort of in the Homeran tradition of it's still poetry, but it's less poetic, and then it'll kind of jump into these very explicit metaphors and poems, and then it will jump back to like the meat.
It's been my ambition for a while, but I've never had time to listen to the entire Consolation of Philosophy chanted in Latin, because there are versions of that, and the sections of it I've heard are just gorgeous.
I'm sure there are. I wouldn't understand any of it, but it would be good. All right, let's keep going.
I need the practice. Yeah.
Your Filioque,
Oh, you want me to run my by first, and then you do yours?
Go ahead first.
Yeah.
You can go ahead.
So we would say that the Father, obviously being the monarch of the Trinity, he is the first person, and then there's the Son who is the second person, and then the Spirit is the third person. This is obviously, as we both agree, according to order of nature, not some weird temporal Arian crap. But then we would say that the principium quare motum, in which the Son is begotten, would be the divine essence itself. And we know that because what is being communicated is the divine essence.
Do you actually know Latin? Do you actually know Latin?
I wouldn't say I'm fluent, but I know the terms that I'm using. No.
So why are you trying to quote a bunch of Latin as if you know Latin? It just comes off as pretentious and fake.
Yeah, not trying to be pretentious. I was.
Brother, you keep using the word paradigm for no reason.
I can say it in English if you would like.
This whole
Bro, do you speak Greek? Why are you saying theophanies?
Right. Yeah.
Jay does this thing I've noticed. Whenever he debates, he uses a lot of technical jargon.
Yeah, he just uses technical jargon and name drop and all. You know, he'll just throw around these philosophers' names as if he owns their concepts. And even though he's using them in ways that they would never affirm, which, you know, I'm not totally opposed to. You can use someone's particular idea if you think that it actually does support your argument, even if you reject their final conclusion. Yeah, to then turn around and call someone who's just quoting a bit of Latin in a discussion on the Filioque is pretty ridiculous.
It's also inappropriate for his audience because, like, I was trying to listen to this, and he's talking about like, I'm arguing on a paradigm level. What do you mean by that? One, I'm not. I have no formal training in philosophy. I have enough that I can get by. Prof, you and I have conversations all the time, and we can at least understand each other. I don't know what he means when he says stuff like that. Like, what are you talking about? Is
Frankly,
it even?
I'm not sure Jay fully knows what he means by that. That's an educated
ad hominems, can we at least address the fact? Can we at least address the fact that he's dressed like he's recording this in his car?
Well, that's just Jay Dye.
Yeah.
No Latin, so you're doing it to give the impression that you're a scholar.
Yeah, no.
Language degree.
No, I wasn't claiming to be a scholar. It's just that's just how I've heard it referenced. The people I've talked to, they reference it that way. I can speak all in English if you would like.
Go ahead and make your argument.
Yeah. Do you want me to do you know Latin is allowed anymore? Okay, yeah. So the principium quare motum, which would be the divine essence, is we know that it's the divine essence because that's what's being communicated to the Son. The Father is not communicating paternity, but rather he's communicating divinity to the Son. And he's also generating the hypostasis of the Son too, right? Sure. But when he begets the Son, what is being communicated is the divine essence. And at this time, obviously using temporal language to describe the Trinity, because that's the best way to do it, the Spirit is not being spirated yet, according to the order of nature. And so that would mean that in the divine essence, in the divine nature, the principium quare motum, we still have spiration. And so if we're to say that the Son does not receive spiration when the divine essence is communicated to him, he's not receiving the fullness of what is in the divine nature. And so that would mean that he is, in some form, an Arian Christ.
So then does the Holy Spirit receive spiration as well because he has the fullness of divine nature?
Yeah, so that's where the distinction between principium quare motum and principium quo proximum, or for people who don't speak Latin, the remote principle by which...
Okay, who made this distinction before Thomas Aquinas or the Latin Church? Where is that in the Cappadocians?
Well, again, this is more so a logical distinction. It's just a logical distinction.
It's a distinction. No, it's a distinction.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Okay, so I love how he conflates who made this distinction before Thomas Aquinas or before the Latin Church, because that is like
right, kind of begging the question.
Half of the Church Fathers wrote at least some things in Latin.
Right.
He also artificially limits himself to the Cappadocians, which, as our good ortho friend, our ortho fella friend, Thaddeus points out, no, the Orthodox still treat Church Fathers like Augustine,
and
very seriously.
They do tend to not like his contributions to divine simplicity, though.
Well, it's because then they'd have to
or predestination or hell, but that stuff was kind of later career
or a bunch
after,
of things. Yeah,
according to
they like Augustine, except for a lot of his core teachings. But Augustine wrote a lot, and he had a very complex theology. And Augustine is one of those guys that gets used by everyone for everything, unfortunately, and probably unfairly. I think that his views were a lot more nuanced than at times his specific paragraphs of writing, where sometimes he'll say something that is true but requires a certain amount of context. And if you're, a Protestant coming to it and you're like, oh man, this supports my position, but it's not necessarily doesn't have all the context of what.
Hey, yo, what up, Thad?
What's that?
Thaddeus is in the chat. What up, brother?
Oh, nice. You'll see that from the Orthodox perspective. You'll see that from Catholics as well. And so this happens with so many of the Church Fathers. I'm reading Tertullian. Tertullian gets used by Protestants all the time, and I'm reading his work against heresies. And it's like I don't see anything that directly contradicts. Well, there's a couple things, but that might contradict the general Protestant ecclesiology. But it's certainly not like a full-throated sola scriptura argument or something like that. And some people will just throw around the name Tertullian as if that suffices for an argument. And so this happens all the time, where these guys will say some things that start to sound like faith alone, and some things that start to sound like one doctrine, and they just get used out of context. And so I think Augustine, being one of the most voluminous writers of his day, said a lot of things that can be used in a lot of ways that are sometimes appropriate and very often not.
A lot of contradictory things as well, right? Augustine changed his views pretty dramatically on a lot of topics.
As many of us do. Yeah, for
That's
sure.
just part of being human, part of life.
It's part of getting really, really mad at the Pelagians later in life.
Exactly. You got a lot of little curmudgeonly at the end there.
And defend your model, so I'm asking if it existed prior to the Middle Ages.
Yeah, I don't think I could give you a specific quote, but I could definitely. I would say sure. I don't know. I'm willing to admit that, but you have to let me at least explain the distinction first before you just say, hey, we can't even bring up that distinction because I don't have it.
You're coming up with a distinction to where it gives the impression that for the Son to have full divinity, it requires that he has the ability to spirate. And now when I say, okay, well then does the Holy Spirit also generate and spirate? Your answer is, you see there's this distinction.
Well, no, it's the same reason that the Son doesn't beget another son. That's the only distinction that I was going to make, is because the principium quo proximum terminates within the person of the Son, right? Because there is a.
Where does that come from?
What do you mean? Where does it come from? This is the logical conclusion.
That. Where do you get that from?
Because the Son doesn't beget more sons. You would agree with that, correct?
Why not? You're just asserting the position. I'm saying, why couldn't he? Why am I supposed to assume that dogmatic assertion is true? This is what Thomas do. You guys just asserted.
No. So you would agree? Yeah, because I'm trying to explain it.
It doesn't matter whether I agree. It doesn't matter. I'm asking your position.
Because this is how we logically conclude the Trinity.
Why should I accept that that's a logical conclusion without you just asserting it?
Because we're both Trinitarians. We both agree the Son doesn't. What do you mean it doesn't matter what the position is?
It's irrelevant to what you're arguing. Why are you talking about my position when you're arguing your Thomas position? So what if my position agrees or disagrees? It's irrelevant to the argument you're making.
And it just
so you let me just clarify. You want me to bring?
What'd you say?
It's just this for the next. How long is left in the video?
It's like 20 minutes left.
Another 18 minutes.
16
Yeah,
minutes.
it's literally just this for the next 18 minutes.
All right, well, we might not be able to finish this, but
it's just painful. I feel bad for Jesus and whatnot, because he's so gracious throughout this entire thing, just trying to have a conversation about the Filioque. And Jay he gets to the point where he starts talking about, I'm arguing on a paradigmatic level, and it's like, okay,
that's what I want to get to. I want to get to the part where Jay starts talking.
I was going to be charitable to Jay, but let's skip that. Let's move on.
Somebody else's position.
And why am I supposed to accept that assertion? That's
what because it's the object of the divine action that's being completed. So when we say
some more Thomism.
Well, sure. I mean, obviously that's my position, but you have to let me explain it. You can't just talk over as soon as I try to explain.
You're not giving me the reason why you're asserting the position again.
Well, it's about to. I was
supposed to accept that this Thomas model is the right model for answering this question.
Yes, I was about to explain that, and would you let me just finish the point, and then you can tell me why you disagree.
To the question.
I'm trying to, but you're not letting me.
Assertion again. No, you're not. Again, you guys don't understand epistemology. You think that just asserting positions is giving me the reason why I ought to accept the Thomist dogma. Why?
Well, no. Obviously, we have the same epistemology, so we can kind of bar epistemology.
We don't. What are you talking about? We absolutely do not.
We have the fathers in the church. We can bar papal infallibility. We can even bar Thomism.
Okay, so interesting point. A lot of people were critiquing Jay for bringing up epistemology. It sounds like, I mean, I don't know who mentioned it first, but That is a bit of an L from Jesus and Whatnot, where he just isn't familiar, I guess, enough with how Jay argues. But they definitely do not have the same epistemology. Jesus and Whatnot is going to be coming from a classical apologetic perspective, which takes on its own classical foundationalist epistemology, and Jay is a preceptor. So they do have actually very different epistemologies. So Jay is actually right, I guess, to take the conversation in that direction if that's where it's going now.
Spent 10 years arguing against your epistemology. We do not have the same epistemology. You have a classical foundationalist model of epistemology. I do not. That's why I debated Trent Horn against natural theology. I reject your whole system and paradigm.
Okay. How
Did you happen to see that debate, by the way?
I have seen most of it, and it's typical Trent Horn debating where he comes in with a very, it's always, Trent is very particular about how the prompts that he picks, and then he always defends it to the very minimum. He never really defends past the prompt, and so I don't remember what that prompt was exactly, but Trent basically just parrots the official teachings and doesn't really ever engage with Jay's critiques of classical foundationalism, which I happen to agree with those critiques. Like I tend to follow the modernist perspective, the modernist critique on classical foundationalism, and Trent never had an answer for it in what I watched. I don't know that I finished the entire debate, but it was rather unsatisfying in terms of an apologetic debate.
See, I tend to agree with that, with the last point, that it was largely unsatisfying, but partially because, as you say, Trent tends to be very, very, very cautious and very modest in his arguments.
He's kind of a talking points apologist. If that's not too mean.
He will limit. He will defend a particular. Oh wait, hold on. Okay. I mean, okay.
The other Paul for
Thank you.
5
Paul.
says, my mom told me to clean my room, so I challenged her on a paradigm level to justify the normativity of clean.
I mean, it
She
might
had
work.
no response, of course.
The real question is the other Paul. Why is your mom still telling you to clean your room? It's perhaps a bit of an own goal there. But
The other
Australia's expensive. He's
That's
stuck.
right.
Yeah, there you go. That's fair.
no shame.
I mean,
Go ahead.
there
Professor.
is a paradigmatic argument about that. Okay, let's use that as an example because I think that's a really good one. Okay, cleaning your room. Okay, so let me also bring in something else that's related to this. I find, I have, for some reason, relatively recently, I've been on something of a deep dive on the game mechanics of Magic in different like fantasy systems and like tabletop systems and things like that, and how things like Magic that cleans things. Well, how does it know
this
what
level
dirt
of nerdiness? I'm gonna have to
Is
pour
it-
myself a tall glass here. Right, sorry, keep going.
Well, cheers.
This
right?
is what it sounds like when you start going on about tag.
Yeah. So
This-
like
This
for
is how
example,
I feel.
well, for example, if I clean this glass, does that mean the whiskey disappears from it, or does that mean that the smudges around the rim disappear from it and the whiskey remains there? Right. It depends on what the thing is that you're cleaning, whether you're cleaning the glass of whiskey or whether you're cleaning the glass which has whiskey in it. Those are different things. So you can't make these distinctions, I would argue, from a classical, largely Thomistic, leaning Platonist perspective, that you have to have something like metaphysical essentialism to have a good concept of what clean means. And so if you're going to challenge that at a paradigmatic level, which I think Jay would, and say that these are more like imposed normative descriptions by the owner of the thing, or by the mind that interacts with the thing that is to be cleaned, right? And so clean is defined by how mom wants it, rather than clean being defined by the nature of the room, right?
That wouldn't be Jay's position, as I understand it.
Okay.
Let me steelman Jay's position.
Isn't that separately something he holds though? I thought he also has talked about that sort of thing. I'm just using this as an example to illustrate a sort of paradigmatic.
Well, maybe finish your example, and I'll come back with kind of the presuppositional perspective.
So if you're going to address a question like this at a paradigmatic level, the question then comes to, okay, is the dirty laundry on the chair clean, part of the room being clean or not? Right? And if you're going to argue that, well, it's not to mom's satisfaction, that's one perfectly reasonable paradigm. But that is one that's sort of perspective dependent or something like that. Whereas if you're to say that, well, part of how the room works, part of the functionality of the thing is that the laundry goes on that chair. If there's a good chance I might wear it again, but I might not, and so it might need to go into the laundry next time we do a load. Right? And so this has a functional aspect to it, and so therefore it is clean as the part of the living context of this room. That's more of a sort of neoclassical Nouvelle Theologie kind of perspective, if you want to take it that way, versus clean, meaning everything is in its proper place as it ought to be by the nature of the way that the room is originally laid out and how it is as part of the household, rather than part of how one lives in it. Right? These are different paradigms that have different practical results, and so you might wind up, you won't have an argument with this with your mom, because she'll tell you to shut up and clean your room. But you can have this kind of philosophical argument that will get down to, well, what do you mean by clean in this context? And that depends upon not just the meaning of the word, but it depends upon our understanding of the things that we're talking about. We might have the same understanding of the word clean, but a different understanding of the nature of the room. And that's what he's getting at, I think.
So how in your epistemology, how do you solve those different paradigms? How do you choose between them?
I mean, you have to get way deeper into. I am a classical epistemologist when it comes to this, right? But so I would say you need to get into what is the nature of the thing that it is under consideration, right? And
but how do you know that nature?
Right. So the thing under consideration is, first of all, an artifact. It's a room, right? And so it is created by certain people for certain purposes. And so it needs to, in order to determine what the nature of the thing is, you have to look to the purposes of its creation.
Sure.
And the purposes of the creation of the bedroom is to serve as a particular kind of thing, right? A particular kind of bedroom. And so I would, of course, lean towards the
because of the humans who designed it?
Yes, because artifacts are, for a Thomist, artifacts are, they don't have essences because they have teleology imposed upon them by creators and users. Okay. I go a little bit more naturalist than that, a little more Scotist than that, and say that they do exist, but they are subcreated, if you want to use the sort of Tolkien term, rather than created by God directly.
Sure.
But in either case, their precise nature is determined by their human creators and users. Right? And so the cleanliness of the room is determined by those who create, own, and use the room as a room, right? As a bedroom. Right. Now, how to determine that is, well, you need to, you can have further arguments as to whether that is the appropriate way to consider artifacts. Right. And of course, whether the Thomistic point of view, where artifacts don't have essences, versus the more Scotist position, which is the one I take, that they do have essences, but those are created by finite human persons rather than God.
So what do you call the first order creations that aren't artifacts? What's the term for that?
Natural things, or natural objects, something like that.
And so how do you determine the teleology of the natural things?
Well, we wind up getting back to the convertibility of the transcendentals, right? So if you take divine simplicity to be correct, and if you take goodness to be convertible, that is equivalent to the same as being, to say that something is a certain kind of thing is to say that it ought to be in a certain way in accordance to the way that it is created by God. And to say that it ought to be different is to say that it's falling short of that nature in some way or another. Right? Which, I mean, I've written a little bit on this. I actually have actually working on something, might come out later at some point, where I think I argue that you need this kind of a framework to understand For example, medicine. Medicine is a pretty paradigmatic case here, because to understand what a disease is or what a health defect is, you have to know the proper functioning of something. And how you determine the proper functioning isn't just something like it's not getting in the way, or therapeutically it's non-traumatic or something, but rather that it is functioning according to the proper kind of the component that it is in the thing that we are. That makes sense?
I think so. And so it all,
now you can
all of
disagree
that
with
flows.
any step of that.
I don't think I do so far. All of that would flow out of your understanding of God, right? Pretty much all of those, the transcendentals are going to flow out of your understanding of God. It's all going to come out of God.
Yeah.
So I think in that regard, we're going to be in alignment. And I think even a presuppositional is going to be in alignment, even though they might have different understandings of God, right? If you're going with a divine simplicity versus essence synergy distinction, conception of the Trinity and God, you're going to have some issues there. But so far, I think so good. The big distinction that I see when it comes to sort of the presuppositional versus the classical is the presuppositional, as I see it, recognizes that you cannot deduce your way to that God, whereas the some versions of classical apologetics and classical epistemology seem to imply that you can. They seem to imply that the proofs for God, Aquinas' 5 ways, these are essentially, if not coercive, they still follow by necessity. Like they are, anyone who understands them correctly must by necessity, accept God, at least as sort of this transcendent being, even if not fully understood by special revelation.
Yeah,
and that's where the presuppositionals will take issue with.
I will say I'm I'm a lot more excuse me, I'm a lot more sympathetic to the presuppositionalist than most Thomists are, because I'm not strictly a Thomist. I'm if you press me on it, I'm more of an Anselmian.
Okay.
So
you like,
have 5
meaning
kids.
you like the ontological argument?
Yes, among other things, but yes. Because it avoids that problem by being strictly a priori.
It does, but it runs into its other problems. Yeah, this is...
Yes, and one of those other problems is really interesting, which leads into something almost like presuppositionalism, which is Aquinas' critique, which is the idea that yes, Anselm's version of the ontological argument is perfectly sound, but it's only convincing if you already know that God exists, because you have you have some kind of cognition.
It's faith-seeking understanding.
Yeah,
which is how it's always intended to be used, and used that way, it kind of works. But used to create faith, it doesn't work.
How can you be an Anselmian, Vince, when you have 5 kids?
What?
You slurred Anselmian, and it sounded like
incel. All right.
Oh no. Okay.
That's a low tier pun. All right.
Clearly not. It's no,
I guess I think that
cosmological arguments like Aquinas's work as something like intuition pumps. They're inductive arguments. They can get you to understand what is meant by God, so that something more fundamental and more a priori, like the ontological argument, like the transcendental argument, which Aquinas gives a version of as well, and he doesn't just dismiss it like he does Anselm's. But things like that those are logically sound. Now, in terms of whether they're convincing to an atheist or not, I wouldn't approach an atheist with the ontological argument, probably. So,
right. It does seem to lack a certain amount of convincing.
It feels like cheating.
What's that?
It feels like cheating.
It does. Well, and I tend to think that it is cheating. I think that it is sound in one sense, in the sense that it's, any circular argument is sort of sound, but it is also, there's a reason why we don't use circular arguments, because they can't actually add anything to the content of your knowledge. I think that it can be run in a non-circular way. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, depends on what you mean by non-circular. It works in the same way that you can prove any other kind of self-evident first principle.
Well,
right?
that
By
is the
showing
thing. That
that
is the
the
question.
denial of which will lead to a self-contradiction.
So this is the biggest I think distinction. One of the big distinctions between the two kind of epistemological schools of thought is that the presuppositionalist is not willing to allow for any self-evident facts except for perhaps God. Like that God is the one thing that we will take as self-evident and let everything else flow from that.
Oh,
Whereas what's that?
I guess I'm kind of a presuppositionalist then, because I
Well,
think
see,
that's
that's the thing. And so, in as far as what you've said so far, I'm kind of with you. Now, the thing that the normal, the kind of Van Tillian precept will do, and what Jay will do as well, is they'll then try to say, they wouldn't use the ontological argument, but they would use, Jay will use tag, or they'll use some kind of argument, some kind of transcendental argument that kind of ends up being circular in nature, but they will say it's okay because everything is circular at some point, and they'll run all these sort of logical tricks, and they'll talk about how they're at a meta level, but in the end, it ends up being something that logically just doesn't work, and they will try to logically, syllogistically allow that one presupposition of God. And that's where I part ways from that version of presuppositionalism and say, no, the only valid arguments for any properly basic belief are going to be inductive in nature. And so in that respect, I accept the, Aquinas' 5 ways as inductive arguments, which is how I read them. I even accept a version of Anselm's argument, which I think can be read as an inductive argument, where it basically starts with the idea that existence is a good, existence is a perfection. Therefore, God must exist because you've defined him as being the greatest good thing, basically. There's kind of a way to run that inductively, but you still have to start from this intuition of existence being a good. And so if you run these arguments as inductive arguments, then I think they end up being valid. But I don't think there's any way to syllogistically, in a valid sense, get yourself to a proof of God that follows by necessity. And so I think that you have to make a leap of faith, but not a leap of blind faith, but still a leap of faith to close that gap where you now actually accept God. And then you can go from there. And so I think there's this interesting kind of point where you can start to harmonize aspects of the classical epistemological method and the presuppositional, but both basically they aren't willing to talk to each other because they both have what I call an unwarranted expectation of certainty, where the classical apologists want to be able to get certainty from their inductive arguments, which that's kind of Hume's critique. It's like you can't do that. And then the presuppositionalists want to get certainty from their circular arguments or their appeals to incredulity. And both of those ultimately fail on logical grounds. And so I think both of them are trying to make this certain claim to God, which I simply say, we can't. There are ways that we can be justified in our knowledge of God and still allow for a certain amount of uncertainty. So, I'm a fallibilist in that respect.
Okay.
But
I think there's a lot less distance between you and I then than would often appear with these kinds of discussions, or maybe then between certain kinds of precepts and certain kinds of classical epistemologists.
Yeah.
Right? I think I'm a little bit closer to your end on the classical side, and you're a little bit closer to my end on the precept side.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Well, there you go. Maybe we can join forces and create this new third way that I'm trying to develop.
I think
because no one else talks like this.
Yes,
At least
I think
officially.
the only difference we might have is that I do think you can have certainty about God, but that it serves the role in the rest of my epistemology that it typically will serve for a lot of presuppositionalists that I've read and spoken to, which is that they'll often use something like a transcendentalist argument that the only way to have anything like metaphysical certainty is if you presuppose the existence of God, and therefore the reliability of human reason and the reliability of revelation, and therefore all of this flows straightforwardly in a relatively classical epistemological way if you have this presupposition of God's existence. I just think that you don't need to necessarily presuppose God's existence, but that the denial of God's existence, once God is properly understood, or at least the concept of God is properly understood, that the denial thereof winds up being self-contradictory, which is,
Well,
I think,
right.
the strongest
I mean,
version of the ontological.
but self-contradictory
the
on
most
what
charitable
grounds,
view.
right? The only grounds that it's self-contradictory on are on the observational grounds, which then brings in experience in a way that makes
Sorry,
it no
which-
longer
what
an a
grounds was
priori
it?
argument.
Sorry, what grounds? I misheard you.
The only grounds where you can say that it ends up being contradictory are the grounds of your experience, which then introduces a level of a posteriori.
A posteriori, yeah.
A posteriori. There we go. It's like I can see the word written out, but I can't quite sound it out in my head. It's no longer an a priori argument. All of the checking that you would do to your presupposition is no longer going to be a priori. And so in order for you to have confidence in that presupposition, it's going to be on the grounds of some experiential basis, which I think takes away from the way that taggers will talk about it as being sort of this totally a priori argument. And well, you even said that you're, Anselmian. And so I think that what does faith-seeking understanding even mean if not presupposing God? I mean, I think that's essentially what he's getting at.
Yeah. I don't bother philosophically with trying to reason our way to God from nothing, right? From epistemology zero, from knowledge zero, or
right.
I don't try to do the Cartesian project.
Mm-hmm.
I have no interest in the Cartesian project.
Mm-hmm.
I take the more classical approach. If you want to think of it this way, the Aristotelian approach, as much as maybe other Anselmians might object to that, but the approach that we can and we should take for granted everything that everyone has always already known.
But then aren't you just asserting those as brute facts, and now that becomes the foundation, the true foundation of your epistemology, rather than God?
They're still falsifiable, right?
Okay.
Woo, axioms.
Yeah. Well, if you take all of those axioms as a given, not even just axioms, but just common sense things, right?
Right, but what you're describing, if they are falsifiable, what you're describing is just an inductive argument for God, which is what I'm saying. But how could you be certain in an inductive argument for God?
Well, then it hasn't been falsified, right?
Yeah, well, okay, now you're exactly aligned with where I'm at. Well, because my whole argument for God is that my belief in God is as falsified as the geometric axioms, as the belief that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And so I think that, but I still think that even that point, this is where I think Hume didn't go far enough. Hume basically said, well, with geometry, we'll just sort of allow those things as basically brute facts. And I'm like, wait a second here. You're supposed to be skeptical of everything. You should be skeptical even of these geometric axioms. Whereas so many philosophers just sort of accept those as basically brute facts, even if they're trying to reject all brute facts. And I'm saying, wait a second. No, maybe the reason why we believe the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line is because we've never seen any other example. And the same holds true for God. We've never seen any dispositive evidence for God. I have to be careful there because the problem of evil is a serious problem, but it's not dispositive. So the fact that there is no dispositive evidence, and in fact, all of our experience seems to confirm it, as a Christian, and you kind of do have to buy into some degree, faith-seeking understanding, to really start to see it working. But all of this confirming evidence, and then the lack of dispositive evidence makes me as confident as I can be in God existing, and it's the same level of confidence as the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, or at least it's the same epistemic grounds for believing those two things. Whether it's the same level of confidence or not is I guess a separate question. But the method is the same. That's where I hope, but I still wouldn't call that geometric axiom a brute fact.
No, I think that we can have. I think that we can have as close to epistemic certainty as we can for anything, though. That's just the difference, though. Is I don't set the standard at the Cartesian level. I set the standard at the maximal.
Right. Well,
human
if you're
level.
also a fallibilist, then we don't really have a disagreement there. But I think it's kind of silly to use the word certainty if you are not meaning actual certainty. like I'm not sure. Certainty seems like either you're certain or you're not. I don't quite understand. I mean, it has some semantic range. You can sort of colloquially use it, but when we're talking philosophy, I feel like why use the word certainty if you're not meaning like Cartesian epistemic certitude?
Yeah, in which case, I mean, I disprefer. Let's put it that way, because I don't strongly object to the term, but I disprefer the term fallibilist because it carries with it the implication that with further investigation, it's reasonably possible that I could find out that I was mistaken. And I don't think that applies to any of these basic beliefs, simply because I have maybe it'd be better to say moral certainty, right? A level
Moral
of
meaning
certainty which
practical,
is,
right?
well, a level of certainty which it would be perfectly reasonable and justified to base other beliefs and actions upon, rather than, ex hypothesis, logical impossibility of being incorrect.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Right.
cool with that type of language, although that's pretty close to even how Hume would talk, where he's like, well, yeah, at some point you just got to like live your life. You got to accept certain things and just work.
Well, I'm curious as to what you think of Pascal in this context.
Like him,
'cause
never
one of the
actually read
things-
him, but I'm familiar enough with his
okay,
wager.
I'll have to send you a little list of excerpts from the Pensée.
I'd like to read the
because
Pensée,
Pensée
the
is
entire one, but
unreadable,
it's
to be
that's
fair.
kind of.
It's unreadable. You don't read it cover to cover.
I would appreciate
did.
some recommendations if you have some.
Yeah, I
that'd be
did.
nice.
It was a mistake. You shouldn't do that. But he says in a couple of points. Well, first of all, he holds the ontological argument to be perfectly sound, the argument from miracles to be demonstrative of God's existence, and even Aquinas's arguments to be largely convincing to most people, which I think is a bit of a stretch.
Right.
But he still says that that's entirely useless. All of that, even the logical certitude of the arguments from ontology and miracles, right? He takes both of those to be demonstrative, and he means that mathematically demonstrative of God's existence. But he still thinks that that isn't actually going to get you faith, and that faith will require a particular act of will. And that particular act of will is the submission of the intellect to openness to the gift of divine faith. Right. And so basically that his the argument that he's really well known for being the wager, which he calls the machine, is discourse on the machine. His entire point there is not to say, well, it's a good bet to guess that God exists because you stand to benefit from it. Like that's his like last ditch excuse for if you can't decide otherwise. Here's how you make a decision.
Sure.
And the key point is because you have to make a decision one way or another.
Right.
And if you make the decision to believe in God, God will help your unbelief. Even if you have, the kind of certainty or fallible moral certainty or whatever that we're talking about.
Well, this is the level of this is the kind of cognitive dissonance that I don't quite understand, and I'm cool with cognitive dissonance in many cases, so I don't know why I'm having an issue with this. But I don't quite understand how you go from like these are demonstrably sound and valid, and yet they're not enough to bridge the gap. Like I don't know. I'd have to read it. But I hear this type of argument all the time.
His argument is basically because we get distracted.
Yeah. So we're just not thinking about it seriously enough, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not that our ideas are fallible; it's that we are.
Yeah.
Right. We're just limited human beings, and so even if you have an absolute proof, even if you think proof is absolutely possible, you can have a straightforward, even like a mathematical certainty, a demonstration of something.
Well, I will go with you on that to some
lunch
degree because I think that's my view of induction is that the reason why induction doesn't work to prove anything with certainty is because we don't have infinite knowledge. But if we did have infinite knowledge of any inductive, evidential event, then we could actually say with certainty what will happen with that event. Like in other words, my example is always a blue or red balls rolling out of a pipe. You see a million blue balls roll out of a pipe every 30 seconds, and you have a good reason to believe that the next 30 seconds another blue ball's going to roll out of the pipe, even though you know that in theory a red ball could roll out or not. But if you had infinite knowledge, if you had seen throughout past and future eternity that it had always been blue balls, then you could say with actual epistemic certitude that it was always going to be blue balls rolling out of that pipe. And that's the kind of knowledge that God has. It's a rough analogy, but that sort of infinite knowledge inductively does actually work to grant you epistemic certitude. And so in that way, I agree that those sort of inductive arguments could work to be certain.
I'm not sure that you would even need induction at that point. At that point, it's just either observation or immediate apperception or something like that.
I guess as long as you're referring to propositional knowledge, it seems like induction and deduction are still appropriate ways of describing it. Once you start talking outside of the scope of those two ways of learning things, then it seems like you're talking about basically some sort of non-propositional.
Okay, yeah. So
knowledge.
Inducing a proposition from observation still counts as okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Did you ever watch my the video I sent you on the title was Hume didn't, or the thumbnail I think said Hume didn't go far enough. Did you ever watch that video? It's kind of an explanation of my epistemology.
Yes, but I'm trying to remember exactly a lot of it.
Okay, yeah, it might be good to have a feature.
I'll have to rewatch it
conversation on that. Yeah, because that is kind of where I'm coming from, and I have a somewhat unique articulation of how I view knowledge, and I break it up into three different categories. Where I have knowledge by acquaintance, which is just the raw sense data, how I talk about it, and then I have the rational knowledge, which includes induction leading to postulates, which lead to conclusions, which then feed back into your experience and then your inductions, and then there's also a third category, which is the instinct, which feeds into your postulates and helps you actually form your postulates. And those three boxes, as I see it, form the totality of knowledge that we have. But I think typically people talk about knowledge and they almost exclusively are referring to the rational process, which I define rationality as being only the content of our knowledge that is learned. And so any knowledge that we have actually before we even are born is what I would, put into that instinct box. And I think, I found it to be a very helpful articulation. It's more, it's not a fully fleshed out epistemology, but it does provide a grammar for talking about these things. So anyways, I found it to be very helpful, but perhaps a conversation for another time. We've spent too much time on this. Let's keep going. We can't finish this entire video, but we have to. I don't know. I want to hear Jay crash out a little bit more.
I think
we have to at least get to the point of him yammering on about being at a conceptual level or whatever it was.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
The point that I'm trying to make, and then you can tell me afterwards where you disagree.
No, because
I'm not allowed.
you keep yapping and filibustering and not answering the question. I'm asking you an epistemic question. Why should I accept the Thomistic account of that question when I don't accept Thomism? And you said, well, you have the same type of position, the same epistemology. No, I don't.
No.
Those are not acceptable answers.
Again, we can talk about church fathers.
Answer the question why I ought to accept the Thomistic metaphysical dogmas that you push.
We can bar Thomism if you want. I'm just trying to explain the position. You haven't let me make the argument.
No, you're not. You were answering my objection by just stating the Thomist position. So now it shifts into an epistemic question of why ought I accept the Thomist position and model.
Okay, let me try and extend an olive branch here. Let me extend an olive branch. We can use just Cappadocian fathers, okay, or we could just use just fathers that we both venerate.
Interpretation of the Cappadocians. Let's go to the
Whoa! So I'm not even allowed to bring up fathers now?
So I don't believe you interpret them correctly.
I haven't given you my interpretation.
You didn't give any interpretation.
This is rough. I don't think that
you interpret them wrong. You don't know what my interpretation is. I haven't even given them.
I mean, like, I agree that your presuppositions are going to impact your interpretations, but you can at least hear them out. And there are areas of common ground where, and where there's dissimilarity, then expose the dissimilarity through conversation. Don't just assert the fact that we can't even have the conversation until we basically go back to the paradigm level. In which case, then we can basically just never talk. East and West can just never talk to each other because we don't accept their 11th century concept of the Trinity. That they would trace
obviously
back
now what we just did for the last 40 minutes was a terrible mistake, and we never should have even attempted that, because clearly we have different foundations, and we should have just stopped there and started complaining when we used each other's names. We haven't gotten to that part yet.
Of the Cappadocians. What are you talking about?
Yeah, so then why are you saying I don't interpret them correctly if I haven't given you an interpretation?
Because you're an evidentialist, and I'm not going to give you evidential lines of argumentation when I'm asking you a paradigm level question.
So let me just clarify. I'm not allowed to use natural logic, and I'm not allowed to quote fathers. What am I?
Those positions. Why would you? Well, I'm not a natural theology proponent or a classical foundationalist.
But I'm not allowed to talk about fathers either because you don't accept my interpretation.
You don't understand the allowance. I don't care what you can refer to.
The hilarious thing about all of this is the fathers that he's citing would not have held to his presuppositional perspective.
No.
Like, absolutely not. Their epistemology was radically different. Radically is maybe a bit of a stretch, but was different than Jay's. Jay's epistemology is heavily influenced by modern philosophy. I mean, you can listen to any of his talks on tag, and he will go through modern philosopher after modern philosopher to describe how you get to tag and why he rejects the classical foundationalist view. So that is not going to be the way that the fathers were thinking about epistemology, if they were even thinking in those terms. And so I guess Jay has to throw out all of his interpretations of the fathers in order to, like, I don't know how he doesn't apply this to himself as well. At some point, you do have to just read the fathers in their own words as they would have understood themselves. And yes, you can take your own sort of, I mean, there's a development of thought, and you can take your ideas and sort of impose them back on and try to read out what they were saying and maybe even use your paradigms to correct the errors that you see and whatnot. But Jay's going to run into the same issue. Like, the Cappadocian fathers were not tag proponents. They weren't arguing the same way that post-Descartes Van Tillians and the online Orthodox bros are arguing. There's got to be a limiting principle here.
I mean, the limiting principle is, it's funny. Okay. I'm seeing a lot of similarity here to how to the last video, actually, to the Stephen Anderson, James White debate. That's
why I played it.
Yeah. Well, I had only just made that connection, so very good. That Jay seems to be working on the assumption that his opponent has certain presuppositions, but that he does not, and that he's just reading the source as it is written, presumably in English. Whereas what we're really dealing with is two competing interpretations of the same thing,
right?
Because they're both.
And who's to decide which one is more valid?
Yeah,
which is, and Jay would say the answer is then you have to just completely run tag and go back to the essence synergy distinction and how that's what makes EO the only valid form of Christianity because they have it, and that's the only one that actually allows you to ground the transcendentals. But I've never heard him make a fully convincing argument for that. Like, there's a lot of logical leaps in that articulation, that part of the argument. And that's where I think that he ultimately makes just an appeal to incredulity fallacy, where he says, I can't imagine any way to ground the transcendentals without the essence synergy distinction. Therefore, it must be the essence synergy distinction. I was like, well, your imagination, the limits of your imagination are not actually the limits of truth. So that it does not follow. I'm not saying it's not true, but it does not follow by necessity.
I can't imagine how you can ground anything in metaphysics or ethics without divine simplicity. So
well, there you go. Well, now, okay, then turns out Jay's
I've
wrong.
presuppositionally debunked Jay Dyer entirely.
You can run these all day long, and you're always gonna. It's just not gonna get you to where you want to go in terms of absolute certainty. So, yeah. No, well said.
All the things you want to, I'm just going to keep calling it out as to why it's a non sequitur, and I don't accept that as an argument.
So you don't accept the early church fathers that we both venerate, and you don't accept
your interpretation. I don't believe that they're theory neutral.
I haven't given you an interpretation yet. How do you know you disagree with it?
Postmodernist?
No, Muslim. Muhammad.
Yeah.
They do this all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Because
I can see that.
Whenever you run what's called the Quranic dilemma, which is basically the Quran affirms the Christian and Jewish scriptures. It says that they're in part of Allah's revealed word, and Allah's revealed word can't change, but also the Christian and Jewish scriptures are corrupted or being interpreted wrong. And it gets to the point where you go, so what about this, and this? They just go, I don't agree with you. They just get stuck in this this spot of they'll only just say the same thing over and over again, and that's what Jay is
obviously doing. You're not interpreting that through the words of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, right?
Exactly. It's just
over and over. You would see how it's not actually a contradiction.
Yeah, no.
You would just see that it's A and not A, and how that doesn't contradict itself.
Yeah, Muhammad's prophesied in the Song of Solomon, getting into Solomon's bed.
Wait,
I don't want.
Oh, you
is
don't
this
know?
an Al Sood reference or?
No, it's not an
Oh.
I wish I remembered the passage off the top of my head. There's this passage talking about like a beautiful one or something, and Muslims go, "This is clearly about Muhammad," and then you like open up the Song of Solomon, and it's about his bride. They're just so stupid.
Well, not being.
Well, I mean,
allegations.
okay. To be fair, Muslims do have the tendency to do something very similar to what I've noticed is very common in like Southern Baptists, I guess,
I could probably
where
say
they treat Holy Scripture as if it were a book of quotes to pull from. And
right.
as a professor of mine once said, that reason in that tradition is really just arranging those quotes in order to say things that you would like to say, which is very different from,
proof
reading
texting, we
context.
call it, right?
Yeah.
Proof texting. Yeah, no, I'm very I did a lot of that as a kid.
Yep, not a great method.
Accept the Thomist reading of the Cappadocians because I've dealt with it before.
Okay, let's pretend.
Then goes to so the question moves to a paradigm level question of epistemology and models. So why am I supposed to accept your model of theory neutral epistemology, classical foundationalism?
Okay, Jay, pretend I never told you I'm a Thomist. Let's just have a conversation about the Filioque.
I debate paradigms. Do you not understand this? And no, you don't, because you're a Thomist. Do you understand you can't?
What does that mean?
Yeah, Jay, I'm not here.
What does that mean?
Thomists don't understand paradigms, don't you know?
This is so stupid, dude.
Great.
It's
Again,
just
I'm gonna try and be charitable here and assume that what he means by that is something like that. Oh wait, maybe I'm not being charitable. Maybe I'm gonna be uncharitable to it. So we'll see where it goes. I think what he might be trying to argue here, or at least imply here, is that Thomists have this tendency to simply assume that their particular metaphysical and theological view is the singular correct way to understand things, right? And that that there isn't really argument to be had about their fundamental foundations. Which, okay, fair. Like I will occasionally notice that about Thomists, that a lot of times they won't actually put arguments forward about the really basic paradigm level parts of their metaphysics, of their worldview. But he's a presuppositionalist. He explicitly does that. And now maybe you can make an argument that is, I don't know, hypocritical on the part of some Thomists who sort of implicitly do this. But to criticize Thomists for not questioning their baseline fundamental paradigm level assumptions is weird to me, because I mean, he explicitly, he doesn't question his very basic paradigm level assumptions. He takes them to be, the solid foundations for worldview, rather than being, what would you say? You're the presuppositionalist. Help me out here. That do you see where I'm getting at with this? Right? That this seems exceptionally a strange critique of Thomism from his perspective, even though, I get where he's coming from. I could get where he's coming from if he were coming from somewhere else.
I missed most of your argument while I was away.
Okay. It seems to me like he's criticizing Thomism for almost being presuppositionalist about its fundamental metaphysical assumptions. Right? That it just sort of takes itself to be the paradigm,
right?
That explains the world, but
right. Well,
but
and he's willing to do that because of Tag, because he thinks that his particular paradigm is the only one that grounds transcendentals, which is why every argument, Jay's fallback, whenever he starts to feel like he doesn't want to engage on the technicalities of the particular argument, because he's willing to engage in things that are not Tag. He'll have non-tagged conversations, but as soon as he starts to feel like the technicalities are getting beyond him, or if it's off script, or it's just not what he wants to talk about, then he can always fall back to Tag, and that's what he does here. He's just basically redirecting it to Tag, because that's where he feels like he's got the sure ground, and he thinks that in the end, Tag only works if you hold an Eastern Orthodox perspective. Now, doesn't usually go very far in explaining that because usually he kicks the person out before they can ever actually even get to that part of the conversation. But that's why
coming.
he's
Don't
redirected
worry.
here. Yeah, I'm sure. It's bringing back memories.
To debate paradigms. I'm here to debate the Filioque.
Moving the debate to that because
You're-
because I don't accept your interpretation of the Cappadocians.
So you couldn't refute my points. Now you literally said you're moving the goalpost to debate something else.
When it comes to a question about this is the exact same debate I had with Arrow 4 years ago, or not Arrow, whatever the Thomas guy's name. It's the exact same debate where you want me to accept a bunch of metaphysical givens and assertions in the Thomistic scheme, and I don't, because I have a different paradigm. So the debate moves to the epistemic level.
Well, okay, I agree that if you want to move it to the epistemic level, that's something you can do. But you haven't.
The debate moves there.
Ooh, that's
Me
interesting.
wanting to,
But-
because I'm telling you.
That's really interesting. Okay, so you mentioned that this is not how the Cappadocian Fathers would approach the question of epistemology, and I think we just really found where that distinction lies. That Jay seems to be operating on the assumption that epistemology is prior to metaphysics, whereas every pre-modern school of thought that I'm aware of had that inverted. They took theology to be first philosophy, then metaphysics, then a bunch of other stuff, and then epistemology. Right? That epistemology had flow from metaphysics rather than the other way around. Which, I mean, yeah, that points to a really sharp distinction, and I think maybe that's why they wind up talking past each other, and why a lot of people wind up talking back and forth past J. Dyer.
It's just hard to then apply that to trying to interpret the pre-moderns. that's the bit of cognitive dissonance that I don't quite understand in Jay's reasoning, because surely he must know that their epistemology would have probably flown out of their metaphysics, or at least would have been different from his own, unless he's just going to take it for granted. But at that point, he's just making a historical assertion that I don't think that he can back up. And even his precious tag isn't going to get him to that historical level of
the way I
certainty.
can see it maybe working is if he's willing to say that the Cappadocians, or even the pre-moderns in general, got epistemology wrong, but they got the metaphysics right, maybe by coincidence, it seems like, because he seems to derive his metaphysics from his epistemological approach, from Tag. And it just so happens that aligns with their metaphysics, from which they then derive an epistemology which is radically different from his own. And so what we wind up with is a kind of contradiction, but it's a weird one. It's a really weird one.
Agreed.
It's odd.
Well, I think we haven't actually beat this one to death. There's more to do on it, but we just got to move on.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
We
got to well, there was one other thing. I recommend you watch it on your own, just because this is wrong.
I should.
There is a part where Jay gets very frustrated with him being referred to by name.
Yes, he always does. He hates when people call him Jay.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite. I don't know if you guys have ever read How to Win Friends and Influence People, but one of the lines in there, one of the most famous lines, is no one loves any sound more than the sound of their own name. Well, apparently for Jay, that is not true. He hates it when people just say Jay, which normally people are saying because Jay is actively interrupting them. Interrupting them. And
that is
they're trying to get Jay's attention, and Jay hates being interrupted while he's interrupting you.
Right. No one likes being interrupted while they're interrupting.
Exactly. All right. So, all right. This
so
is
true. Nobody likes to be interrupted when they're in the middle of speaking.
Exactly.
Sorry, James. I can't help it.
Thank you. This clip I wanted to get to. This is Fauci, and I had not seen this before. Professor McCoy brought this to my attention, and this is just a remarkable clip. Fauci's been in the news a lot lately because of some of the hearings. There also, I think today or yesterday, came out that he had full knowledge. He and a number of other people during COVID that the vaccines were likely to cause miscarriages. and pregnancy issues, and yet still recommended that that all pregnant women have them, that there would be no limiting principle on who should get the vaccine. And, so I think we're all in alignment of how abominable a lot of that was. But it does make a little bit more sense when you hear his view of ethics and religion in general. So this is a very interesting clip. Let's go and play it.
There's the Auburn Chapel where Chris and I were
That's
were
where you were married, right?
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Do you still go there? Do you
No.
you don't practice
No,
anymore, do you?
I don't, no.
Why?
A number of complicated reasons.
Go on. We have a whole corridor.
First of all, I think my own personal ethics on life are, I think, enough to keep me going on the right path. And I think that there are enough negative aspects about the organizational church that you're very well aware of. I'm not against it. I identify myself as a Catholic. I was raised, I was baptized, I was confirmed, I was married in the church. My children were baptized in the church. But as far as practicing it, it seems almost like a pro forma thing that I don't really need to do.
Well, if you don't feel like you need to do it, then there you go. I guess you can do whatever you want. What a despicable human being. But yeah, well, it kind of checks out. It doesn't surprise me to hear him say that kind of thing at all. Many such cases.
Well, when you think you know
unfortunately.
better than God, I mean, we've seen what happens.
What was it? Recently, they signed in, I forget which state, but governor signed in a rule. Was it Massachusetts?
Yep, Massachusetts.
Yeah, where abortion all the way up to the moment of birth. And
Well, I've
the
been
governor
reliably
is
informed that
a
that just doesn't happen, so nothing to worry about, right?
right, exactly, yeah. Non-issue, and the governor is a Catholic, and should
Lesbian
be
as
excommunicated. So yeah, and a lesbian. Yes, yeah. Square that circle for me.
No.
I
Can't
would
do it.
love to see that excommunication on the wire, but haven't heard about it yet, so we'll see. I wait with bated breath.
It is, I will say, there's two problems, ecclesiastically, right, and Catholic perspective here. There's two problems. One, that's up to the individual bishop. Right? We have had instances where particular bishops have effectively excommunicated Catholic politicians who have supported abortion. Like Nancy Pelosi was publicly denied communion by her bishop. The trouble is that she then immediately traveled to another diocese and received communion there. And so
that's kind of like the Protestant dilemma, where excommunication
yeah,
doesn't
well,
mean very much.
there is a bit of a problem there. I will say, right, that and that is part of that is just that.
How does that work? You can be excommunicated locally and still be accepted in another community within the Catholic Church?
Not technically, but it was because it was not a formal canonical excommunication, which is a formal legal penalty. Which a bishop does have the authority to decree, right? A bishop can formally issue a canonical penalty of excommunication, but that's not what happened, right? The bishop merely exercised his authority in his diocese to instruct his priests to deny communion to such and such a person.
I see. Okay.
Right. That it did not escalate any further, and because it didn't escalate any further, she can do the Protestant thing, so to speak, and just go somewhere else. Right? Go to DC, which is what she did practically. The other thing going on is the Fauci problem, where you can't exactly deny Anthony Fauci communion if he's just not showing up for it anyway. He still calls himself Catholic. It's just that he has not darkened the door of church for God knows how long. Probably at least since he killed Freddie Mercury. So it's been a while.
Wait, hold up.
You don't know about this?
Is it because of the AIDS stuff?
Yeah,
it's not just because of the AIDS stuff. It's a little more complicated than that. But yes,
abysmal when it came to the AIDS.
He was largely responsible for a lot of the misinformation during the AIDS crisis in the 80s. In particular, he was responsible for pushing the extreme communicability of AIDS beyond just
beyond just your own proclivities.
Yeah, but then also he was not as well known, but this is something I only found out about in the last couple of months, I think, a little while ago, that he pushed really hard a particular AIDS treatment that was, one, extremely ineffective, and two, lethal. It killed, by proportion, more people than AIDS.
Well, and I know also he's always been really big
Including Freddie
on
Mercury.
vaccines. Like he's always wanted to find the vaccine rather than other treatment methods. And so I know that was a big part of the mishandling as well, where he was just really pushing all this money and effort into trying to find the vaccine rather than pursuing some of the more maintenance options there. But
we saw that in COVID too, with him.
Well, of course, that's why I bring it up. Yeah.
You know, suppressing things like hydroxychloroquine. What was the other one?
Ivermectin.
There's another one that was it?
I think ivermectin might just be
ivermectin,
the name for
right. Suppressing those
horse
as
medicine.
legitimate cures. Right. Well, there's a human version. It's been.
Yes, I know.
It's a very effective
I have the
antiviral.
tablets.
40 years. Now, on the abortion note, there's also a horse medicine that can induce abortion that I know a lot of radical feminists were promoting at exactly the same time that CNN was calling ivermectin horse-based. Because of the whole Roe v. Wade being overturned thing. So there's a horseshoe theory of horse medicine, if you really want to go that way.
It's all just depressing. Yeah.
But,
horseshoe theory, horse medicine.
Yeah, again, it's if you know that there is that high of a likelihood of miscarriage, which the specific statistics that I was seeing was that if you received both doses of the COVID-19 mRNA shot during your first trimester, the rate of miscarriage was something like 82%, which is about equivalent to RU-487, which is the abortion pill.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just abysmal.
And by the way, the WHO, the World Health Organization, initially recommended pregnant women not take the vaccine, but after pressure from Fauci and the CDC, they removed that warning.
Well, I mean, it's one of the most horrendous elements of the whole COVID debacle was the fact that we pretty early on realized that this thing does not seem to affect kids. It has an extremely low impact on children, which is like, all right, praise God. Then basically we can all get back to our normal lives, send the kids to school, protect the elderly. Those people probably should take the vaccine, blah, 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 whatever. It's like, and they just refused to go with the data on that. And
there was a clip from near the end of the hype of the pandemic from Sam Harris, where he was saying that he was, what was it? It was something like he wished that it did affect kids more so people would take it more seriously. And when you get to that point, you really need to examine your conscience really hard, because you are flooring it straight down.
Sam Harris relying on his objective morality and human flourishing. That's getting him really far there.
But Vince, didn't you hear him say that he can totally get by with his basic morality as it is?
It's enough. When you are God, you can do that. When you are the science and you are morality and you are truth and beauty all at the same time.
He is like God. He knows good from evil.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nobody dangerous or evil or sinister ever said anything like that.
No, never. All right, so before we get to the holy fire stuff, I really want to cover this clip because it does actually tie into what we were talking about with epistemology. And the holy fire actually does too. So let's play this. It's a short clip, but it's beautiful. I believe this is Alex, talking to John Lennox. Great guy. Great apologist for the faith. And this is Alex O'Connor, who I happen to be a big fan of, even though he is an atheist. I tend to think that he is an honest. He's first of all, he's an excellent resource for a very high level view of a lot of different ideas. He doesn't go very deep, but he does get at a high level a lot of different philosophical ideas at a level that basically your average philosophical specialist gets outside of their specialty. So like Alex isn't going to be able to challenge someone within their own specialty, but some random philosopher who has a particular specialty trying to opine on something else, Alex is operating about the same level as what I've seen. So
okay. In my experience, Alex is way better than most philosophers outside their specialty.
I agree, actually. Yeah, I wasn't going to give him that much credit, but I've
we
seen that
are
too.
nothing if not hyper specialists. I try not to do that, but I sometimes fail. So.
Yeah. So I commend him in that. But this particular clip is about faith and reason. So I'll just I'll tee it up that way and let you listen to it. Enjoy.
The moment of reckoning was as an undergraduate being introduced to the problem of induction from David Hume. And
Yes.
I remember at the time nearly making a provocative video about it that was going to be called something like, yes, I'm a person of faith. Because I'd suddenly realized that, although it's quite an obvious point to me now, there are all kinds of things which we believe that we don't have any evidence for. And you can list them off easily, things like the existence of the external world,
Yes.
or of other minds or whatnot. But the problem of induction in particular was so empirical, and it came from such an empiricist, just sort of scientist, atheist, heroic figure of philosophy, just throwing up his hands and saying, we have no justification for this, and yet I believe it. That made me realize, oh, okay, so we do that all the time. The question then is what becomes a legitimate kind of faith and what becomes an illegitimate kind of faith. And the problem with the new atheists, I think, is that they were a bit careless in setting their criteria. A bit like, you remember, logical positivism was a huge movement in the 20th century that said for a statement to be meaningful, it must either be empirically verifiable or analytically, mathematically true by definition. And it was really popular for a while. And ultimately it falls because it fails by its own standard. Because the statement that statements must be empirically verifiable or mathematically true is not empirically verifiable nor mathematically true. And in hindsight, you look at it and you go, you just set the bar too high for yourself. And I think what the new atheists did was they said, we won't believe anything without sufficient scientific evidence. And they just set the bar too high and left themselves open to attacks from people who said, well, go on then, prove the existence of the external world, prove induction, prove the existence of other minds, prove that maths will work in 5 minutes from now, and you just can't do these things.
Yes, that's right. I would encourage you, by the way, to make that video. I think it could be real fun.
So yeah, the idea that, and this is my critique of Hume, is Hume will never say that he is ultimately relying on faith, because that vocabulary, that semantic term would have been against his whole vibe. But ultimately, I think properly defined, he would even have to admit that. I think it's just sort of a mindset, or it's just kind of his. I don't know, his worldview and his opposition to religion and the associations of religion with faith that prevent him from being willing to kind of put that in writing. But ultimately, that's clear that in the end, we all do live by faith. That is the natural conclusion from Hume's skepticism. And ultimately, Alex O'Connor is realizing that as well, that when you sort of accept the problem of induction, you ultimately realize that everyone lives by faith. And I mean, that's my epistemology. That's how I think that all rational knowledge depends on faith. And there are certainly things that are baked in, I call them instincts. We can't really know exactly what those are. We can speculate about the content of that knowledge, and we can sort of do some inductive experiments to understand the content. But in terms of how that knowledge got there, it's not really open to us because there's no way to introspectively understand how we got that knowledge pre-programmed into us. And so ultimately, all of our rational knowledge, regardless of how it's informed, is going to be dependent on certain postulates, certain presuppositions that are going to be faith-based. And I think Alex and I agree on that. So, a little bit of common ground there.
Yeah.
Professor, what do you think?
I think that I disagree with respect to Hume. I think that let me say something nice about this, and then I'll tell you what annoys me about it. Okay. So nice about this. I am so glad that the prominent atheists today are so much more, one, courteous, and two, intellectually honest and consistent compared to the atheists of 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Even just
because
10 years
the
ago.
atheists when I was in high school and college were the Dawkins,
Hitchens and
Hitchens,
Dawkins. Yeah.
Harris. Sam Harris. Well, Sam Harris is still around and still being annoying, but as we already mentioned, but that sort of thing. They were really, in the case of Sam Harris, they were more just really mad at Islam, but taking it out on Christianity. Or in the case of Dawkins, working through some kind of, well, let me put it this way. Dawkins read one page of Thomas Aquinas, thought he understood all of it, and then stopped trying to understand religion.
And then spent one page refuting it all. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Meanwhile, Alex and people like him, there are other atheists who have this kind of approach, are rigorous, are honest, are amicable. And I really appreciate that. I could have a conversation with Alex O'Connor. I don't think I could have a conversation with Sam Harris without bringing up some nasty things about, I don't know, the pandemic, about Gaza, about him as a person, about journalists in general, you know.
Look,
that's the other thing. A lot of the new atheists, the post-new atheists, aren't journalists anymore. There were too many journalists in the first crop. Anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hitchens.
Anyway.
Yeah, especially.
So look, when you beat all of the Reddit midwits, the final boss of Reddit midwits is Sam Harris, and you have to face him.
Yes.
The good news is he's soft and pudgy, and you can probably beat him with your hands.
Right. But now we have much nicer opponents. We have much higher quality opponents as well. So cheers to that. But the part of this that annoys me is his operational definition of faith, which I don't actually accept. Right. He seems to be operating on this on the definition of faith as something like belief with insufficient evidence, which is not something I would
define insufficient, though.
Believing in spite of the fact that under other circumstances one would not believe in a different proposition with the same amount of evidence.
All right, but now you're talking about circumstances. So really,
right. But I think that's what he's getting at, right?
No, I think his definition, as I understand it, aligns with mine, which is something that is not deductively proven, meaning a belief. Faith is just belief in something that cannot be proven deductively.
Okay. Well,
which allows for all the inductive knowledge that you would allow for and want to include.
Right. But I think there's two things going on here. One is we're having a debate about, we, meaning you and I and Alex and John Lennox and all of this whole milieu, is having a debate about appropriate levels of epistemic certainty.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Whereas the new atheists are wanting an exceptionally high standard of epistemic certainty, allegedly. Even though they don't hold that standard consistently, they at least say that is the level of certainty that they would want for belief in God, right?
Some of them, I think some of them would just admit that they're skeptics.
But
for God, though, they would. Yeah. I mean,
specifically, they're narrow skeptics. They're skeptics about your beliefs.
Right. Yeah.
And that, I think, is what he's getting at, right? He's pointing to that kind of hypocrisy, which I think is a very, very solid point that we should always be quick to point out. At least when people do that, right? But then, of course, there's the deeper question, the more important question, which is what I already addressed, right? This question of where should we set that standard? And I think what he's using this concept of faith to do is to say that, well, maybe we shouldn't have this wildly high standard for epistemology. Maybe we should accept as knowledge things that we don't have
deductive certainty about.
Mm-hmm. Right?
I would say,
yeah, I think I'm on board there. Sure.
Yeah.
But then there's this. So there's that question. But the part that annoys me is then saying that is faith rather than knowledge. Right?
Did he make that distinction?
I would just call that knowledge.
I would too, but
the
question is
that you exist and that I know that.
Right. And I'm cool using that terminology as well. But then the next question is, how do you define knowledge? And as soon as you say justified true belief, then you have actually begged the question, because true begs the certainty question. I reject the justified true
I'll
belief.
I'll go to the
definition.
original Plato and say justified or belief with an account. There we go.
Yeah, see, I'm cool with that because an account can be inductive. Yeah.
Yeah. Knowledge, right?
I'm cool.
belief.
I'm cool calling it knowledge.
Yeah. I prefer, what is it, Chalmers, I think, who defines it as something like a belief which is causally connected to its truth maker. Right? So that which makes it true is what connects, is what causes you to hold a belief. And this is what gets around like Gettier problems of like, I'm not going to change my background right now to what my background of my office actually looks like and then turn it off or whatever. But you know, that thing where hypothetically, if I'm sitting in my office and I took a picture and I use it as a Zoom background of the office behind me, and is that really behind me? Right? Whatever. Justified belief that's not knowledge. If you're not familiar with it, it's anyway,
no. The Gettier problem is funny. I think that it's all a bunch of analytic philosophy silliness.
I think it points to a real problem in the definition, but only in the definition, not in the.
I think the definition is just so flawed to begin with that it's critiquing a flawed definition to start with, and so it points out a flaw in the definition.
And so knowledge is belief with an account. There we go. We can fine. I'm okay calling that knowledge, right? I'm perfectly comfortable saying that I know that you exist. I know that that this pen is not going to change colors by tomorrow morning, right? I'm perfectly comfortable with that sort of lower standard of epistemology, and to call that knowledge rather than faith, right? Because faith, I think, has an important meaning that we lose if we delineate it to just meaning insufficiently justified belief, or what the new atheists would want to call it, right? Or uncertain belief,
right? Well, I mean, I'm willing to go there in terms of calling it uncertain, but then people assume whenever you start to talk about doubt or uncertainty, they just jump to like the maximum of doubt, like as if having any uncertainty means you have maximal uncertainty, and that's just not true. I mean, you do have uncertainty about everything, but that doesn't mean that you have no justification for anything. You can still have an inductive justification for something, and still lack the certainty in that thing. But that doesn't mean that you can see some things as being more likely than other things on the basis of certain presuppositions. And yes, those ultimate presuppositions.
Punt on this.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to punt on that particularly because I tend to be pretty binary when it comes to belief or knowledge. I don't necessarily agree. I don't necessarily think that knowledge or even belief admits of degrees of certainty. But that's a different kettle of fish. That's not what I want to get into. Because we could argue about that, and I might even be wrong, but who knows?
I'd probably call it degrees of knowledge, not degrees of certainty. But yeah,
okay, maybe
fair enough.
But the point, right, that faith specifically in the epistemological context is belief that is based upon you can either think of it as belief that is based upon trustworthy testimony, or it is the virtuous decision to maintain belief in the face of challenge, right? And I think both of those are far more useful, or not more useful. They are both useful categories that stand to be eliminated by thinking of faith as just belief with insufficient justification, or belief without certainty, or belief without scientific proof, or positivistic proof, or whatever. So
I reject all of those definitions. I mean, when I talk about faith, I'm specifically saying belief without deductive certain proof, and I would just say.
And I think that's missing things, right? That
well, I agree. It's not a complete like biblical definition of faith. There's much more you can add to that, but I think that is wholly in line with the biblical definition of faith. You can add other things on to it, and I think that faith requires it's going to have an active component to it, which is why I use uncertainty rather than doubt, because I think that doubt is ultimately kind of an active component in the opposite direction of faith, whereas faith is an active, in the right direction, whereas uncertainty is a lot more passive. Uncertainty is to is to doubt what dead faith is to real faith, I guess, is kind of how I put it. So there's more to say, but in terms of like the bare minimum, when I'm talking about faith, that's at the base level, and then you can add on things to that, which I think it's more helpful to speak of them in other terms because you are really talking about different concepts. And so I think that it's rather than just putting it all into this semantic bundle of faith, I think you're just starting to semantically overload this one word. But I'm willing to admit that certainly as Scripture uses it, it means much more than that.
Question. To clarify here, do you think that you can have faith in something that you are certain of?
Probably
insofar as you
not.
believe in certainty.
Yeah. So this is
believe in any kind of certainty.
So this is where I would say that. So I go to Hebrews and I see that faith is the. I mean, there's different ways of translating this, but the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. I interpret that as being through the lens of the epistemic model that would have been used at the time is seen is believing. And so when he says unseen, he's meaning like uncertain. Whereas if you had seen, you could be certain of it. Whereas obviously in a post-Cartesian world, we wouldn't agree to that. But assuming that we're kind of in this pre-Cartesian world where seeing is believing, it's like a conviction of things that are uncertain. I think once you see, again, assuming that sort of epistemic model, then once you see, you no longer need the faith. And so I think when we see God, whether that's Theoria, whether that's the beatific vision, however it is, I do think that we probably won't need faith in that state, in the eschaton. I think that the requirement for faith, as I understand it, does seem to fall away.
Okay. I mean, that's a perfectly reasonable and mainstream interpretation, but I tend to disagree with it. I think the reason we don't need faith in the beatific vision is because of our moral perfection, and that faith is a virtue. And I think that you absolutely can have faith in something that you have absolute certainty of, right? It's just that faith in this context is the choice to continue believing despite, say, appearances to the contrary, or despite evidence to the contrary.
But there would be no appearances to the contrary. So what? So
true.
You could have faith, but why would you? It's like,
yeah, that's a good point. That is true. Yeah. But like, for example, if
John, are you bored? Is that why you're grunting?
What?
Well, there's we can go with those, like, those magic tricks that are they're made to make you disbelieve basic truths about like about arithmetic and things like that. Where it's like, well, we have two of this thing over here and we have two of this thing over here, but if you add them together really cleverly, it turns out that there's only three or something like that, right? You can still have faith in arithmetic. You might even require faith in arithmetic there, and you can be absolutely certain that 2 + 2 = 4, even though it might appear as if 2 + 2 = 3 under these weird circumstances, something like that, right?
I mean, I think I'm kind of with you, although I think that, like what I was saying with geometry, I think that those concepts are still, for lack of a better term, up for grabs. Where the reason would be
insofar as you can have certainty about anything, right? That's why I kind of
that's a huge qualifier. That's like that qualifier seems to undermine a certain definition of certainty.
Now, maybe the difference I'm trying to make here is less of a difference on your epistemology, because you don't have this certain versus uncertain difference, this distinction. So maybe there isn't as much of a difference there. But so, great example of faith on a non-theological level. I forgive my nerdiness here, but I'm gonna make a Star Trek reference. Captain Picard maintaining that there are 4 lights is an example of faith. Right?
You've lost me. I'm not a Trek.
Okay, so there's this episode where
don't explain it.
No,
we gotta move on.
Really short version. Okay?
We can't get into Star Trek.
And the bad guys, the alien bad guys, are trying to break him by trying to get him to admit that there are 5 lights in front of him when there's actually just 4. Right? It's a Soviet technique.
Sure. Yeah, I was about to say you could have just gone to 1984, but okay.
Yes. Okay. Trek. Fine. Yes. How many fingers am I holding up?
Yeah.
And Winston Smith saying there's 2, despite then being tortured, is an example of faith. But it's faith in something that he can clearly see and knows with relative certainty, right? In spite of difficulty, in spite of challenge, in spite of practical concerns. That, I think, is a good example of faith in the sense that I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think I disagree with that.
Okay. All right.
So there's probably
Anyway, I just wanted
less
to emphasize
distance
that
between our
as
views,
a-
but okay.
Yeah.
No, I
just wanted to
agree with the
emphasize
active
something
component
that
and
is
the
something
perseverance
encountered.
and the heroic aspect of faith. Absolutely, I think that's all
Mhm.
there. For sure.
Yeah.
All right, we
Right.
got to move on to the Holy Fire. We're not going to be able to cover this as with the amount of time that I wanted, but we're going to get into it at least as much as we can. Andrew Wilson
You mean
brought
we're
it
not
up.
gonna
This
watch
is
the hour and
after.
30-minute Jimmy Aiken episode.
Yeah, exactly. This is
You should. It's a good episode.
Yes.
It's
I would
probably
recommend
better
it.
than whatever Bertuzzi's trad slop he posted. He's kind of gotten really trad sloppy, and it's just as
he has. This was a good video though. I haven't seen Jimmy Aiken.
I know Vince. He's one of your boys now. He's on your team now.
Yeah.
But like
He says a lot of the
objectively,
same things that Jimmy does, just meaner. That's all.
Yeah,
He's meaner about it.
but that's why Jimmy Aiken's video is so great. Like it was
Yeah,
just so polite.
I agree.
All right.
Is that he had
Jimmy Aiken is funny because he's gotten into rather not so polite fights with some of the more militant Thomists, like Christian B. Wagner, the militant Thomist. And that's my more recent exposure to Jimmy Aiken, and those don't cast him in a particularly good light. So I might have a slightly jaded view of Jimmy Aiken, but it is funny to see the intra-Catholic debates going on there. But all right, so Andrew Wilson brought up the Holy Fire. We're just going to play a couple seconds of this just to see kind of his analysis or his high-level apologetic use of this miracle. And then we'll jump to at least some segments of the Cameron Bartuzzi video where he's going into, or the Capturing Catholicism video, where he's going into essentially debunking many aspects of the claims that are made about this miracle.
had the ability to go witness these events. He witnessed like tons of stuff, and then when he died, it says that the Pope hid it, so nobody could ever use it
How
again.
convenient!
Very convenient.
How convenient!
But yeah, another big miracle that's like that is over the tomb of Jesus Christ sits the Orthodox Church in Israel. Now that's true, right? That is in fact the case, that there is an Orthodox Church, a Christian church that's above the tomb.
Wow!
And every year, I think it's every year, they have the miracle of the Holy Sepulchre. I think I'm pronouncing that right, sepulchre. And what they do is they use flame and emulate themselves in this holy flame, and they're burning. They're on fire, and none of them burn.
What?
Yeah.
How do they do that?
Nobody knows. But there's...
This is just one small sect of Christianity?
No. This is the Orthodox Church. People come from miles around.
But who are the people that light themselves on fire?
These are people who are in the church, who are specially selected to basically emulate. They set themselves on fire with the holy flame from torches. And apparently, this is what I'm told, they've had people go and investigate, and they can't figure out how exactly this is being done, but they're completely on fire and they don't get hurt at all.
Jamie, pull that up.
I have.
Right. Jimmy then does proceed to pull up certain clips. Basically, everything that he just said is wrong, even from the official perspective. It's not specially selected people, at least in general. This is supposed to be something that I think anyone who's an actual true believer is supposed to be able to emulate themselves, and it's not supposed to burn. And
it's tourists.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it has been investigated. And
okay, actually, I'm sorry. That's not. There's a little bit of truth to it, insofar as they are specially selected, meaning you have to sign up in advance to attend the liturgy there.
Sure enough, there's some kind of
there you go.
principle, but still, it's generally just people who are there, just commoners, and it has been investigated, like he said, and legally in a court of law, basically debunked, and the church has been forced to change actually many of their statements around this particular miracle. So far from his claim that it's been investigated and found to be valid.
Right.
So
to be fair to the Orthodox Church, albeit not to Andrew Wilson because I don't like him. To be fair to the Orthodox Church, they changed their official statements on the matter before they were required to by law, like substantially before. So that wasn't like it wasn't like they were coerced into changing it.
I think it was while they were being exposed by the media, though. I mean,
I think that's true. That
one particular journalist who was asking them, and particular questions from their like official website, and they were like, "Oh, really? It says that? Oh, we should change that." It's like, well, all right, should have never put it up there, maybe. All right, so there are 2 videos from.
Oh, I should note as well the error started before that, because it's not actually an Orthodox church over the Holy Sepulchre.
That's true. It's a shared church.
Yeah,
Yes.
it is a shared church
custody.
under the status quo agreement, which means that it is shared between wait.
I think it's Orthodox, Roman Catholic, and Coptics.
Yeah, something like that.
No, it's 2 different Orthodox churches and Catholic. I forget which 2 Orthodox
So
churches.
it's probably going to be Oriental, and then Orthodox, and then Catholic. Because I think I don't think the Oriental.
I think it's specifically Greek and Armenian.
Who knows?
I don't know. It's 2 Orthodox churches and Catholic, and it's co-owned. And so it is not an Orthodox church. It is
either way
an Orthodox liturgy. Specifically,
like I said, basically, yeah, right. There are Catholic liturgies that happen in the morning on that day. So yeah, it is basically everything that he said is at least wrong to some degree. And he's at the end of a 3-hour interview. I don't expect him to be absolutely correct on everything he says, but this just goes to expose the way that this is commonly used in apologetics, and he's a very high-profile apologist, and so we should be held to a higher standard. There are 2 videos from Capturing Catholicism. Go ahead.
I don't think that Andrew is lying here. I think he's just wrong.
Yeah, no, I don't think he knows.
I think he's just deceived by the hype, which is easy to do when it's a big miraculous claim that is of really significant I was about to say significant spiritual significance, but that.
Yeah.
So
no, I agree.
Fair to him, but.
All right. So there are 2 videos from this channel on, one was before Andrew talked about it. So again, kind of shame on him for not, having looked into it a little bit more. And then one was after, because it was just, I don't know, it was providential, I suppose, that this video came out, and then Andrew posted Andrew talked to Joe Rogan about this specifically. And then Cameron brought out another video specifically targeting some of the issues with what Andrew said. We're going to watch the first video because this is the more in-depth one going into the issues therein. And we won't watch the whole thing, but we'll kind of jump around here and just go into some of the major issues.
Easter, thousands of pilgrims flocked to Jerusalem to witness the holy fire, a flame said to ignite miraculously inside the tomb of Christ and not to burn those who touch it. The official website of the Patriarchate of Jerusalem called it a true miracle that admits no doubt. Modern Orthodox apologists defend it as genuine and lead their followers to believe them. But what if I told you there is deeply troubling evidence that this entire thing is manufactured and that the Eastern Orthodox hierarchy knows it's manufactured? In this video, on-camera confessions from the clergy who run the ceremony, sworn testimony from archbishops, and a court ruling published just months ago on how the fire is really lit. I'm Cameron Bertuzzi with Capturing Catholicism, and this is Eastern Orthodoxy's darkest secret. Our story takes place in the most famous church on earth, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Built over the traditional site of the crucifixion and burial of Jesus, in the center of its great rotunda stands a small marble chapel called the Edicule. Inside it, the tomb. Every year on the day before Easter on the Orthodox calendar, tens of thousands of pilgrims pack this building shoulder to shoulder. They've come for one thing. Around midday, the Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem arrives. He removes his golden vestments. He stands in a simple white garment. The tomb has been inspected and sealed shut with wax. The seal is then broken. The Patriarch enters alone. He kneels at the stone where Christ's body lay, and he prays. And then, fire. Within minutes, thousands of candles are burning. The fire is rushed to the airport, where chartered flights carry it to Greece, Romania, Georgia, where it's received like a visiting head of state, government ministers, honor guards, live television. The Orthodox tradition makes a very stunning claim about this. The fire, this fire, comes from heaven. It appears as a mysterious blue light inside of the sealed tomb. And pilgrims add something more. They say that in its first minutes, the holy fire does not burn. Many say the first 33 minutes, one for each year of Christ's life. And there's footage of this that'll make you look twice. Watch this. I'm going to be honest with you because that's the whole point of this channel. That clip that we just watched is the single best piece of footage that I found in favor of the miracle. She holds the flame relatively steady against a sweater for seconds. Hold on to that clip though, so we're going to come back to it. And it's not just anonymous pilgrims. A few months ago, Orthodox apologist Alex Soren interviewed an Orthodox priest, his own spiritual father, who was part of Romania's official delegation to the ceremony in 2011. He stood 5 meters from the tomb. Let's listen to him carefully.
The police stopped him, did this control, searching for some lights sources, and then they allowed him to enter in the tomb.
What else happened during the search? So they had the metal detector.
Yes.
So were they going through his?
Yes, like in the airport, but it was impossible to have something on him because he didn't have. He wasn't dressed with all the vestments as a bishop. He had just this.
Where it happened, and if you've watched my content, you know found meticulously.
He would love to believe it. We're moving on.
Her paper away from the flame, but it catches fire anyways. And watch what she does next. She puts it out fast. She hides it in her pocket. That is not how you treat fire that cannot burn. And she's not alone. Here's a second video. As you watch this clip, notice the physics on display, okay? They're holding the paper far away from the flame, so it takes a little while to light. But enough heat accumulates, and it eventually lights. They blow it out quickly. A miracle fire that obeys distance and contact time is simply not a miracle, okay? It's a description of how pretty much every flame that has ever existed works. Which brings me to the observation.
Now, I will say, these clips of it burning are not necessarily dispositive, right? Like, I think part of the whole thing is that it doesn't burn people that it only burns people that are true believers. I think that's part of the claim. And so I suppose in theory, maybe you could say that these people just weren't true believers, or you could say that it was past the sort of expiration date of when it's supposed to not burn. Like if it's only the first 33 minutes or whatever, maybe these videos were taken after the fact. It does appear that they're doing this experiment with the expectation that it's not going to burn, and then it does. So that is something, but they're not in themselves like a single piece of evidence that shows, oh, it's all fake.
Maybe the pumpkin patch was not sincere enough.
Yeah.
What I remember from the Jimmy Akin episode, at the very end, the conclusion he came to is that it's not a miracle, but it's also not something that the Orthodox Church actually claimed very strongly was a miracle. They didn't dissuade people from the idea because they didn't want to upset little old grandmas who really believe. But we
get to that later.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the points is that in an interview with, I think the second in command, right below one of the patriarchs, the journalist is talking to him and says, here on the website, it says, basically uses miraculous language. And the guy's like, what? It says that? Right. And he was surprised because he thought that they were careful enough to never make that strong of a claim. So yeah, I think that's true.
There was also, I forget if it was in Cameron's video or not, but there was also the interview with one of the bishops who actually presided over it several times, I think 3 times. And he basically just forthrightly said in front of cameras to a journalist that, no, the fire is lit from the lamp that is already there.
Yeah, no, I mean that much has been admitted in court documents, and it's pretty clear that it's not miraculously, spontaneously combusted. I mean, people can argue that, well, it's a tradition that's been around for 1,000 years. Maybe in the past it's spontaneously lit, and now they just do it for because they don't want the tradition to end, or it's sort of a backup just in case it doesn't light itself or something like that. I don't know. That I've heard that sort of explanation. And I guess fair enough. I mean, I'm not an atheist. I'm not a materialist. I can believe in miracles. It's possible that there's something miraculous here, or has been at some time something miraculous, or in particular instances, God miraculously protects certain people from fire. But the idea that this is something that just completely defies the laws of physics and nature every year over and over and over seems to be bogus.
Yeah,
it would be nice if this was a miracle, because then we could just all go, oh, there's this miracle. It's pretty obvious Christianity is true, but that doesn't seem to be the way that God wants to test us. I just think of all the passages where the Jews in Jerusalem are like, "We'll believe you're the Messiah if you give us a sign," and he's like, "Well, you have you have the prophets." You have the law and the prophets, and you still don't believe, so no sign will be given to you.
I think it does point to perhaps an issue with how miracles are conducted and studied. So, I mean, the difference between a magic trick and a miracle is, at least as we in our modern context understand them, is the level of scrutiny and investigation that clearly this does not stand up to. It does not meet that level of scrutiny. Now, there are certain Catholic miracles, and probably some Orthodox ones as well, maybe even some Protestant ones, that do seem to meet up to that level of standard, where people like scrutinize it, study it, and they can poke holes in a couple things, but like they can't really come to a conclusive understanding of like, how did this happen? It does seem to be odd at the very least, and you'll get secular people saying even that kind of thing. Is like the Shroud of Turin is one of those sorts of things, which I'm very Shroud pilled. But
yeah, I'm there too.
there are certainly things like that seem to live up to a higher level of scrutiny. Yeah. But I do wonder that that's even the right approach to understanding miracles. I understand why we do it, but I kind of side with Chesterton on this. The idea that people will like talk about ghosts and say, well, when we've never observed a ghost in a lab, and Chesterton's like, well, maybe ghosts don't like being in labs. Like maybe ghosts don't prefer well-lit rooms with a bunch of scientific instruments. Maybe they like being in mysterious haunted houses. Like, and he's got a point there. Maybe you can't expect these sort of supernatural things to follow your natural laws and to if they are of a supernatural nature, to conform to your natural expectations and your natural methods of exploration. And so I do think that there's a bit of a methodological issue here, where as soon as you try to inspect something through your scientific instrumentation, you're actually perhaps kind of violating the rules of how you're supposed to look at miracles, or even sort of how these supernatural things tend to operate. So I'm a little bit conflicted there, because I do think that there is something to some of these things that really do seem extraordinary, and even when we put them up against the scientific scrutiny, it still seems extraordinary and cool all the more. But I'm of the mind that maybe we should call a lot more things miraculous than we currently do. Like there are a lot of things that appear even natural that are completely miraculous. I mean, we don't understand why gravity happens, and yet we live our whole lives with an assumption of gravity without understanding it. That is miraculous in a sense. And if all that makes something miraculous is a lack of understanding the why behind it, the natural why behind it, then gravity absolutely lives up to that standard. So I do wonder if there's maybe a methodological issue here.
Yeah. Chesterton said something else too that was very relevant to this, right? That it was in, I forget if it was Orthodoxy or Heresies, it was in one of them. When he was talking about how maybe it isn't that God does these exciting miracles every once in a while. Maybe it's that God loves creation so much that everything is as exciting as a miracle could possibly be to the creator of all of it. And that the reason the sun rises every day in exactly the same way is that God, with the enthusiasm that only a child can muster in our world, says, do it again.
Right.
Or something very close, or something maybe a little more.
I think that is in Orthodoxy. It's a great book. Orthodoxy, it's a short read, and it's so worth reading.
I always mix up Orthodoxy and Heresies. They're both great. They go together really well as well.
Yes. I have found that pretty much, yes, they're both Chesterton. I have found that pretty much all the ones that people quote are from Orthodoxy, and I only say that, and I only say that without mixing them up because I never read Heresies. Okay. So I should read it, but I have the somewhat fortunate position of not having to mix them up, because every time I hear a quote, I'm like, yeah, I've heard that one, and it's from Orthodoxy. So
I mean, Orthodoxy is
the one to start with.
He wrote Heresies first.
I know.
Because he was critiquing a lot of modern thought, and then came around to saying, well, maybe I should actually write what I think is true instead of just debunking, right?
What I love about Orthodoxy is it's exactly the right kind of apologetic, where it's a personal apologetic. He's just saying how he came to understand the faith as being something legitimate for him to accept. And that is much more relatable to me and much more convincing to me than Aquinas' 5 ways. Like I find that to be so winsome and persuasive when someone just tells their psychological story of how they came to faith. And that's essentially what Orthodoxy is. And it's very poetic, it's very beautiful, and I think ultimately very convincing. And it's more than just about theology. I mean, it lends itself to a just sort of conservative mindset through and through. There's a lot in there that I think refutes a lot of libertarian vibes and just a lot of wisdom throughout. Good book.
I don't listen to Chesterton for his politics, but anyway, that's another day. Now the other sort of relevant thing too, though, about miracles is something that same bishop who I was mentioning. I forget his name, but he's the Orthodox bishop. He said something like that God isn't just a genie that we can call on to conjure fire, right? That's not how miracles work. That is putting far too much agency on us and not enough on God when we're talking about miracles.
Of course.
And that also, again, Augustine said this. He said basically the same thing in roughly the same passage as that other time that I was talking about.
Short of a covenant, a case where God has explicitly, made a promise with us, we have no binding authority on God. I mean, even in that case, we don't. It's God binding himself. But so this is where you can point to certain things.
Do such and such.
Exactly, which is why I think that there is sort of conversation around baptism and sort of the magic words and the magic the ritual. What sort of impact does the ritual itself have? I think it's a worthwhile conversation because there's a covenant theological aspect to that where it's like God is actually seems to have bound himself to aspects of this ritual, and there's still a debate to be had whether it's whether he does it simply of himself regardless of the ritual, or if he does it through the ritual. It's kind of like with the mud on the eyes of the blind person. Did Christ heal the blind person through the blood, or did he just do the blood for some symbolic reasons and then heal him afterwards, totally of his own power? It's all God's power and it's all God's will and action, but the means is up for discussion. But yeah, the only time where we can call on God and expect and rely on certain that He will do something for us is when He's promised to do it. Yeah, that's how it works. Alrighty.
I don't. Again, this is something I don't remember if it was in Cameron's video or if I'm just thinking of Jimmy Akin's video. But there was another angle of that same woman with the sweater. Where she sets her hair on fire for a moment.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the same woman or not. It's a little bit hard to tell, but yeah, he plays that video here as well. It's hard to tell if it's the same woman, but yes, there are examples where people's hair gets caught on fire, and he does play that. And it's quite funny. And even in that video, you can see the sweater is clearly burning. Like, I don't know what the sweater's made of. It might be slightly fire resistant, but it's clearly like singeing. So it doesn't even look that miraculous in that instance.
There's a lot of things
settles claim to on its own. In every one of these videos, what is the holy fire doing over and over thousands of times an hour? It's lighting other candles, like almost instantly on contact. So which is it, fire that ignites everything it touches, or a fire that can't burn anything? You can't have both. Fire that lights a wick on contact but supposedly can't singe your beard isn't a new...
If it was miraculous, you could have both.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking the same thing. It's like,
I mean, again, I think part of it's
God
just
wants
that
to light candles.
Yeah. Well, the whole ceremony is really cool. Like the fact that they take the fire from it to other countries and treat it with like honor. That's cool. That's like a really.
I would love to have in my parish a fire from the Holy Sepulchre. That would be really cool.
Rad. Yeah, same. I'd take that. That'd be cool.
That said, we do this. I do this every year. Almost every Catholic church does this every year. It is part of the Easter Vigil Mass. Is we start with a fire that is blessed, and then it is spread through the congregation and brought to the Paschal candle, which is kept lit throughout the year. And so it is still the same fire that was lit and blessed on Easter, that is the fire that is used to light all of the liturgical candles throughout the year, typically at least. This isn't always the case. Sometimes there are lighters involved, but that's not the important part. The important part is the sort of symbolic continuity,
right?
Which is what's going on here. And trust me, that Easter fire, it can burn you. Ask any child.
All right, so let's jump ahead to some of the.
So he knew exactly what this was about. First, let's talk about the mechanics. Okay, the sacristan explains that before the patriarch ever enters, 2 oil lamps are brought into the tomb. 2. Why 2? Well, let's watch this interview. The interview is in Greek, but you can read the English captions on the screen.
Και προφανώς να υποθέσουμε ότι υπήρχε και μπαίνει και ανάβει ως ασφαλιστική δικλείδα. Αυτό το χρησιμοποιώ πιο πολύ σαν την λειτουργία φιλοτροπική του Παναγιώτη. Οι φυλάκες το θεωρούν προνόμιο, όπως μου είπε και ο γεραιότερος των φυλάκων. Το θεωρούν οι ίδιοι προνόμιο να βάζουν το καντήλι. Αλλά το καντήλι που ανάβεται. Ναι, μπορείτε να το πείτε σαν την κλίδα. Και σαν την κλίδα.
He says there's a fail-safe in this video. Now sit with that for a second, because why does a miracle need a fail-safe? And in passing, the sacristan settles claim too for us for good. Watch him describe the ceremony's own historic candle. What he says here is that the holy fire melted the cross on its own ceremonial candle. So it does burn. Even they know that it burns. And then comes the key exchange. Just watch carefully what he says here.
Δεν θέλω να μου πεις λεπτομέρειες, θέλω να σας ρωτήσω εγώ. Μπαίνετε μέσα, το ανάβετε ανά τον Αγιο Τάφο και φεύγετε για να το βρει αναμένο ο Πατριάρχης. Είναι έτσι ή όχι? Είναι έτσι. Είναι έτσι.
He says, so it is. The sacristan of the Holy Sepulchre, the man who prepares the tomb, just said on camera that he lights the fire before the patriarch enters and leaves it there to be found. And in case there's any doubt about what he means here, watch this.
Για το πώς ανάβει. Αυτό αφαιρέθηκε η φράση που λέει ότι... Πώς ανάβει η Αγία Καντήλη και πώς αγιάζεται. Σωστό. Το πώς αγιάζεται, αφού κατεβαίνει η Θεία Χάρις, είναι θαύμα. Πολύ ωραία. Σύμφωνοι. Το πώς ανάβει όμως δεν είναι θαύμα.
Now, to be fair...
So when I light the cigar through natural means, you know, that part's not a miracle. But then also God comes down and lights the cigar in cooperation with the lighter that I'm using, and that's a miracle. It's like, so sure, I mean, fair enough. The laws of physics are miraculous, but that's not normally how we use the term miracle.
Yeah. Primary and secondary causality, right?
Right.
The secondary cause of the cigar being lit is your lighter, and the primary cause is God.
It's
and
God.
So, there you go.
Fair enough.
That said, okay, so Aquinas defines a miracle as as something which has only a primary but no secondary cause. In other words, no creaturely causality involved. There is no natural sequence of causes that leads to something. It is only the direct divine intervention.
Right.
In that sense, nah.
Yeah. It would certainly seem so.
Now, that said, the blessing is strictly miraculous in that sense, because that is simply God acting. So that I think that's perfectly fair to call that miraculous.
The sacristan draws a distinction. The light.
What's that?
It's not what most people would think of, and
sure.
And it might be deceptive to call it that to, you know, Granny in the pews, but you know,
right?
I think it counts.
He says, is natural, his own hand before the ceremony. The sanctification, the fire becoming holy through the patriarch's prayer, that he believes is God's work, the way bread and wine become body and blood in the liturgy. He is not a cynic, okay? But watch how uncomfortable he is and how he answers anyway.
Σας πειράζει αυτό ότι αρνείστε να πείτε ψέματα? Σαν ως ιερέας. Σαν ιερέας, σαν αρχιερέας, αν δεν μπορούμε να δημοσιεύσουμε να ψέματα και ακριβώς πρέπει να πιστέψουμε το θρησκευτικό κομμάτι. Όπως και στη λειτουργία, δεν ξέρω κάτι το άτομο μόνο στο τραπέζι, βάζουμε εκκλησία και μετρέπεται σε αίρε. Βάζουμε τον Άουτα και μετρέπεται σε σωμοδίδους και αγιασμούς. Στο χέρι. Δεν έρχονται μόνο.
As a priest, I cannot lie. I cannot go out into public and lie about what is happening. Now, remember those words, because the question now becomes, what did the institution above him do with this truth? Did they apologize? Did they correct the record? Did they open an investigation? No. They sued. The book, Redemption on the Holy Fire, hit Greek bookstores in March 2019. The Patriarchate and its archbishops took the journalists to court for defamation and more. The sacristan separately tried to force the confession video off of YouTube, claiming that it was recorded without his consent. Here's how that went. 2022, the Court of First Instance of Athens rules the video was made with his consent. And then in March of 2024, the journalist is acquitted in the criminal proceedings of everything. And then comes the ending almost nobody outside of Greece has ever read or heard of, the ruling that I've been talking about this entire time. One archbishop had pressed on, the second in command, Aristarchos. His claim was civil, not criminal, meaning he was asking for money damages on the grounds that the book had injured his honor and reputation. But now here's why that matters, and I want you to catch this, okay? To decide whether the book injured his honor, the judge first had to decide whether the book told the truth, which means she had to weigh all of the testimony, the recordings, the emails, the sworn statements, the book itself, and rule on what actually happened. Think about what this is. Okay, for the first time in the ceremony's 1,000-year history, a neutral referee examined the evidence about how the fire starts. Not a church committee, not a comment section, not an Orthodox YouTuber, a judge under rules of evidence with both sides fighting it out. And in February of this year, 2026, she issued her decision, number 2611 of 2026. Quick transparency note, so this ruling is in Greek. I don't read Greek. The translations you're about to see were produced using the help of AI. And the complete original document, I've linked it below so that anyone can fact check me. Any Greek speaker can verify everything that I'm saying. After nearly 7 years of litigation, that's a pretty long time, the court rejected the archbishop's claim. And not on a technicality, it wasn't a dismissal over paperwork, but it was on the merits. The judge examined the substance in a fully contested proceeding and ruled. Here's the 3 key findings. Finding 1, the judge framed the central question exactly the way that we have in this video. Is the fire lit by divine intervention or by human intervention? Here's her answer. Whether the holy fire is lit by divine or by human intervention, it is proven from the evidence submitted that the latter is the case. Proven. Her own word, by human intervention. Finding 2, she didn't stop at human, she specified how. It lights in the same way it lights in every church, that is, with a lighter or matches. The most famous miracle in the Christian world, apparently, in a court's considered finding is this. It's the same flame as the candle stand at your local parish. And finding 3 is just wild. Okay, remember, Aristarchus is the plaintiff here. This is his lawsuit. These are his legal filings, written by his lawyers, saying whatever he wants them to say. And the judge noticed something about them. At no point categorically denies this fact. Okay, so follow the logic here with me. If the fire really descended from heaven, this lawsuit was the archbishop's golden opportunity to say so under oath in writing with money and honor on the line and pretty much everything to gain. All he had to do was deny it. State plainly, the fire is not lit by human hands. But in nearly 7 years of litigation, he never did. The second highest official of the Patriarchate of Jerusalem sued a journalist over the claim that the fire is humanly lit and never once denied that the fire is humanly lit. So you might ask, how did the judge reach her findings? Okay, well, sworn testimony, affidavits. Now, if you're not a lawyer,
all right, so I think we get that. The fire is lit by natural means. A lot of Orthodox believe and admit that. Now, the question of whether or not it actually burns people, this is, he goes into a little bit more here, so I want to play a couple more clips just to get a sense for some of the claims and some of the explanations.
Here's someone doing the exact same experiments in theology. That's just how candles into fire. It's simply not a miracle. Okay, it's a description of how pretty much every flame that has ever existed works. Which brings me to the observation I think settles claim 2 on its own. In every one of these videos, what is the holy fire doing over and over thousands of times an hour? It's lighting other candles. Anything. You can't have both. Fire that lights a wick on contact but supposed on what you touch to it and for how long. Paper and wicks catch skin moving through a flame doesn't. That's not theology, that's just how candles work. But so what about the videos where it seems not to burn? Look closely though, and you'll find that they're actually very easily naturally explicable, usually by more than one factor at once. The famous face washing and beard passing, I mean, the explanation is clearly motion. Watch the hands though, the flame never rests in one place. And you don't have to take my word that ordinary fire behaves the same.
Now, that one is not very convincing. There are, yeah, I know exactly. Sometimes it will burn.
Well, hold on.
Like,
Didn't he say this fella just washed his beard before doing this? Because if he's got water in his beard, that'll keep it from lighting.
That does make a difference.
That would certainly do it. There are plenty. I mean, you could use certain forms of wax, or there are plenty of ways. Yeah. Like magicians exist. There are plenty of ways where you can, if you know you're going into this with, and you want to create a cool video, you can make it look very cool. In the same way that any magician will make fire breathing or all these sorts of things look very cool. So any video of this working is certainly not proof that this is a legitimate miracle. And again, the videos of it not working are not exactly dispositive, but assuming it was an actual believer and it is sort of within the first 30 minutes, which again, I can't verify. I don't have the exact details on these videos, but if someone's hair catches, that it only takes one instance in theory to disprove that part of the miraculous claim. So,
at least the universality of it, because like you said earlier, it could be that God preserves certain faithful from being burned by it. Like that's possible.
Yeah,
but it being a sort of regularity, that's I think disproven.
Yeah. So let's just watch a couple more of these clips and then we'll close out here.
Here's someone doing the exact same experiments in his own studio with an ordinary flame near and on his face and on his hands.
Well, clearly he just got some of that flame from the Holy Sepulchre, and it's still a miracle.
I was going to say he doesn't have
no tomb, no patriarch, but the same miracle. It's just motion and contact time. That's basically the whole trick. Now let's come back to the sweater clip that I played for you earlier. It's my honest best of for their side. But there's 3 things I want you to notice. So 1, freeze the frame right here. The flame is leaving black scorch marks on this woman's white sweater. It's depositing heat and soot, exactly what ordinary flame does to fabric that chars instead of catching. A lot of fabrics do that. Paper, on the other hand, doesn't have that choice. And 2, watch what happens after she holds it steady for a second. She goes right back to just moving it around. And then 3, she knows that she's being recorded at what might be the emotional peak of her religious life. Like, again, people flock and pilgrim here in the thousands. So in her case, it could just be adrenaline, doing what adrenaline does. And then I found something really interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The idea that he makes this point later. I don't know if we'll get to that particular part, but how if you go to these motivational speakers conferences where they have people walk across hot coals, they will tell you the same kind of thing, like, "Oh, I didn't even feel it." And it's like, yeah, when you're all hyped up on adrenaline, sometimes you just don't even feel the pain. That happens. That is natural.
I found an unlisted video on YouTube in Greek, which is probably why nobody's seen it yet.
I guess Greek's a dead language.
Now, this one may be a second angle of the very same scene. I can't confirm that, so you got to judge for yourself. But honestly, it doesn't matter whose hair this is. Like, just watch what happens. Her hair literally catches fire. Okay, she puts it out very quickly, and then she goes right back to waving the flame under her arm like nothing happened, while the phones keep rolling. That's not a woman holding miracle fire. Okay, that's a woman who just got burned by ordinary fire, and then kept performing for the phones, which is exactly what I've been describing. You've got this belief that this is miraculous fire. You've got adrenaline in this moment, and then you've got an audience in front of you that's going to carry this person straight through the evidence.
All right, so that's pretty much the whole argument. You can watch the whole video. It is a good video. I think it's worth watching, and even the second video covered it a little bit in a slightly different, from a different perspective. But yeah, I would be curious to see if there is a rebuttal to this. I have not seen a high-profile one yet. A lot of Orthodox friends have started to kind of admit that, yeah, this seems about right.
I have a feeling there won't be a lot. Yeah. I mean, just don't hang your faith up on particular claims like these.
Yeah, it's not like this proves anything. This doesn't disprove orthodoxy, or I mean, I've seen comments to where people were saying that this, Bertuzzi is presenting this as if it's a defeater for orthodoxy. I don't think he's presenting it that way, and I don't think that it is. It's not.
I think some of the editing's a little unfair. He's kind of attacking.
He's got sinister music in the background.
Yeah,
but
which I think is unfair because I don't. My understanding was, and it's been a minute since I've listened to that episode on this mystery on
I just listened to it this afternoon, so I can refresh you on it if need be.
I remember I remember the only reason that the church kept it kind of vague was for the little old Greek grandmas, and that was basically it.
Well, that's the thing to understand about the Orthodox Church, by which I mean the Orthodox Church as distinct from online convertidox, right?
Right.
The Orthodox Church traditionally has the hierarchy has followed folk traditions, right? That is how, and that is very distinct from Western Christianity. And I'm including Protestants and I'm including Catholics there. Western Christianity tends to be more top-down, traditionally and doctrinally, whether that is from church hierarchies or whether that is from just prominent theologians and pastors. Am I fair on saying that even about Protestantism? Because I think that more or less follows. Maybe there are exceptions to this, but right?
Say that again. You're saying that Protestantism is more bottom up than top down?
Right. Eastern Orthodoxy tends to, at least in terms of their traditions, they tend to decide things from the bottom up, whereas Western Christianity tends to decide things more top down, whether that is official church hierarchy in the case of Catholics and some really high church Protestants, or even just from prominent theologians and pastors making these promulgations that then sort of trickle their way down to the common level. Whereas the Orthodox and the Eastern churches in general, because the Eastern Catholics do this too, tend to take folk practices, evaluate and elevate them gradually, right? Which is where we get most Eastern saints, whether Orthodox saints or Catholic saints or the crossovers, are just people who were venerated in particular communities, who then a bishop says, hey, this guy was a holy man. He seems to have a long tradition of veneration. Let's promulgate that throughout our patriarchy, and then let's promulgate it further than that. And it just sort of spreads from these organic traditions. So this isn't really weird, this kind of thing happening, where, there was this ceremony that has been done for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it is miraculous in the senses we've been talking about. And so, sure, a bunch of people show up for it and think, oh, this is a miracle, which means God lit the flame. And so it just sort of spreads like that, and no one tells them to stop.
Right.
And that's not weird, right? That's not weird for Orthodoxy, and it's not sinister either.
I think
it's
that's
not
a
weird
fair
for that part of the world.
analysis.
It's fine, but
I do think that
Eastern sensibility, I would say.
There is a concern that I have, and I have this with both versions of institutionalism, both Catholic and Orthodox, where there does seem to be this fear of scandal that leads to more scandal.
Okay, yeah.
I've seen
Is that a fair
evangelical churches
critique?
do it too.
No,
No, that's,
they certainly will.
yeah,
But
I think that's just a human. I think it's a human thing because
You know,
the Roman Catholic Church has done it. It's hitting it because it's a big institution. When it fails in this way, it tends to look a lot bigger.
It's much more, well,
Versus,
extraordinary
like,
claims require
evangelicalism.
extraordinary evidence, extraordinary claims to moral standing. When there are instances that go against that claim, that's it's going to be more high profile.
I've got two examples. One for illustrating your point, and then one as a potential sort of counterexample. To illustrate your point, we have the sex abuse crisis, right? And Theodore McCarrick and everything. Part of why that got as bad as it did was because there was an attempt to handle it quietly, right? And then eventually, once it got out, it not only got out that it happened.
Handle it is maybe a little bit of the wrong term when it's moving people around to then abuse people in other situations, which, as I understand,
the purpose
is part
wasn't
of
so
what
that they would
handling
abuse people in other situations. The purpose was to remove them from the situation and
but
hope
the
that they wouldn't do
obvious
it again.
result.
Because if they did anything more, then it would become public, and we don't want it to become public. And, right, I think that's the motivation for why these bad decisions happened. Because they were clearly really bad decisions.
Right.
I'm not going to dispute that. I don't think anyone will dispute that. But I think the motivation behind it was, like you said, we don't want this to become public, right? And that led to the situation just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And then by the time it did become public, not only did it become public that it happened, it became public that it was made worse, and then it became public that it was covered up, and it got worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely right. That happens a lot. But on the other hand, I think that the Catholic Church, at least as far as I know, at least in relatively recent memory, I guess, the church does tend to be pretty careful about miraculous claims.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Rome's pretty good about miracles. I like the way they do things a lot.
Yes. Like the great counterexample to this is Medjugorje, or however you pronounce that. The Marian apparitions in Portugal, I think.
There's so many apparitions. So which one
I
is this?
think that one was Romania. I listened to.
Oh, that's right.
I did listen to. Yes. I think it was a Jimmy Aiken episode. It was Medjugorje or something.
Yeah, it is officially discouraged. Let's say it is condemned to hold that one must believe in them, in these apparitions, and it is not officially endorsed by the church because there have been investigations into it that were inconclusive. Right.
What about Fatima? What's the standing?
Fatima has been confirmed by a bunch of investigations.
Okay.
Which I completely believe the account of Fatima, the apparitions to the children, to the miracle of the sun, right? All of that. I think there are really good reasons to think that all of that did in fact happen according to the stories. That said, kind of tying it back to the miracle of the Holy Flame, if I found out that didn't happen like at all, and it was just an accumulation of folk stories, that wouldn't impact my faith at all, like in any way.
So that's not dogmatized in any way?
No. It is officially approved, right? Meaning that it is
okay to believe,
spiritually safe to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're not sinning by believing it. That's what an approved miracle means.
Are there any that are dogmatized? I mean, surely there are some miracles, but
yeah.
But are there?
That's it. I think
any non-scriptural?
There are no miracles that are dogmatized after the closure of the canon.
Okay. All right.
Specifically because public revelation ended at the writing of the last book of Scripture.
Well, this is where we are in agreement. Are Eastern Orthodox in agreement on that?
I think so. They're
Thad, are you still in chat?
Yeah, I would like to hear an answer on that because
I think they are, but it's more vague, like most things.
Yeah, it's definitely more vague.
Yeah.
Orthodox, give a straight answer. Challenge level impossible.
What the Catholic Church does for miracles?
Even Thad, love Thad. You ask him a question, you get 10-minute answers.
Oh well, yeah.
Well, I'm
I'll give
sympathetic to
10-minute
that.
answers, but I'll give precise definitions of things.
Yeah.
Sometimes. That's different.
No, it's Orthodox definitely do tend to dodge many times, but you know, there some things I'm okay with a little bit of cognitive dissonance. I think that again, I go back to Chesterton. I believe there's a quote from him. I don't remember this exact quote, but basically where the idea is you take sometimes the most profound truths flow from a central mystery. You know, if you allow for a few mysteries, then it actually allows for a much more coherent worldview. Whereas, you know, the person who's just sort of a total skeptic allows for no mystery, and ends up having a completely incoherent worldview because they can't even allow the central. They can't even admit the central mystery of any of their knowledge at all. You know, they're just infinitely skeptical. And I think that, I mean, that's basically just a facsimile of my epistemology, where it's like you take certain things on faith and then you work from there.
See,
I think that makes sense.
I'm in a way contrary to that because I can't stand the Eastern mentality of just let it be a mystery and try not to discover it and don't dig too deeply into trying to figure things out with precision or certainty or anything. No,
Of course not.
I always want precision and certainty whenever I can have it, and sometimes even when I can't. But I also recognize that is a me problem, and that isn't.
It's so funny. I've been talking about this.
Thing. That's all.
Yeah, I've been talking about this a little bit for the last several weeks, where how Calvinism, as I see it, is this weird like middle ground, or not middle ground, but like if you have these Venn diagrams, Calvinism occupies this odd space where it like there's a lot of Eastern Orthodox vibes that fit right into it, and then a lot of Catholic vibes and doctrine, more so doctrine, that fits right into it. And one of those things is, you know, Calvin was really slow to adopt even some of the creedal formulas in terms of the Trinity, because he felt like at some point you just got to say, like, he loved the expression, I don't know if it's from Cyprian, or I'll say Cyprian, it might be Cyril, I forget exactly says it, but basically I'm constant. When I think of the three, I think of the one. And when I think of the one, I think of the three. It's like that was his Trinitarian formula, and Calvin was like, that's really good. Like that's kind of the most true that we have, and then we can try to explain it more. Ultimately, Calvin accepted the creedal formulas because he felt like they were extremely effective in refuting the heresies, which we do reject. And it's like you say homoousia, and you know you reject the Arian heresy, and you know so it's like, and I think that.
No.
What's that?
He's right.
Homoousios. Homoi is the Arian.
You reject
homoousios is the Arian position.
You accept homoousios and you
okay.
reject homoious.
It's not the word I was confused
same
about.
substance versus similar substance.
Right.
No, it's not the word I misunderstood, Vince. It's which one he was rejecting. It was accepting or rejecting.
Okay. I may have misspoken, but anyway. So the idea
you're rejecting homoousios. Hold on, buddy.
Yeah. Turns out I'm an Arian. Well, it wouldn't be the first time I've been accused of that. And that's where so I was watching Since 33 AD, which is a great channel. You should look it out. You should check it out if you're interested in scholastic thinking, Thomistic thinking, and I think Kevin is his name, who runs that channel. Friend of Christian B. Wagner. And one of the points he had a guest on, and one of the points that the guest made is that, this is in response to my super chat question, asking for basically what are some of the key distinctives between like the Calvinist understanding of predestination and the Thomistic understanding of predestination. And basically he didn't have enough time to really go into it, but the overall answer that he gave, the high level answer that he gave, is that the Thomistic scholastics just seem to work these things out to a much deeper level. They seem to go much farther in terms of their analysis, and to which, compared to the Reformed scholastics, Turretin and John Owens and whatnot, to which I say that's probably true. I'm not sure that's a good thing, and that's kind of Calvin's mindset, is that maybe we shouldn't go past, to use a modern metaphor, the headlights of Scripture. The headlights only shine so far, and to try to extend too far beyond those headlights is wading into very uncertain grounds and maybe unprofitable. And I have a lot of respect for that position. And so that's one of those areas where I kind of sympathize with the Eastern Orthodox acceptance of mystery. And I think Calvin would as well. But again, that's where Calvin is this odd sort of middle ground where he shares a lot with these different parties and gets attacked and hated by everyone. So oh well. Yeah.
See, that's part of why I'm not per se a Thomist, because I do think he gets a little close on the predestination side of the question. If we want,
oh, he's fully on board with the predestination side. Yeah.
No.
All right. According to the Thomists.
Anyway.
According to the Thomists, the strict Thomists will tell me that. So yeah.
Okay. I think you could make that argument fine, I guess. But I think there are distinctions to be made, but they're deep in the weeds. Like I said, I'm more of an Anselmi and a little bit of a Scotist when it comes to those sorts of things. But
what do you think about middle knowledge and Molinism?
John's done Scotus.
Oh, that's worse. That's the worst of both worlds.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I think.
But okay, briefly, counterfactuals of
Are you capable of brief?
The truth value of counterfactuals of creaturely freedom, which are necessary for middle knowledge, require naturalistic causal determinism. For that to be possible, the world has to be a clockwork world, and so it not only diminishes human freedom, it also diminishes divine sovereignty. And so God isn't fully sovereign because God isn't an immediate cause of everything, nor are we agent causes of everything, of anything, because our choices are caused by antecedent natural causes.
Yeah, I think I track with that. Basically,
yeah.
My view of Molinism is that I think middle knowledge absolutely exists and God has it, but I don't think that it doesn't do the work that Molinists think that it does or try to claim that it does. Where if it exists, it doesn't remove God's culpability any more than a Thomistic understanding of predestination would remove God's culpability. I'm not saying God is culpable for evil, obviously, but it's I don't think that it does the work that the Molinists are trying to say that it does. I do think that middle knowledge, as I understand it, seems plausible to say that God has that kind of knowledge. He has the knowledge of counterfactuals, but it's if then God is then manipulating all of the instances to make us do what he wants us to do, then it's well, he's still the one ultimately doing it all, and I don't think that you solve the problem you're trying to solve. So
I completely and fully accept your critique as damning to Molinism, but then I also point to other critiques that I also think are damning to Molinism. Basically anything you say about Molinism damns it. So
yeah, there we go. All right, well, Molina, sorry. Yeah.
It is my least favorite
Molina
view
a Jesuit?
of almost everything.
Was he a Jesuit?
Despite
I don't know.
Acceptable in the Catholic Church, but I apologize on behalf of us.
Prof, can you answer John's question? Was Molina a Jesuit?
He was a Jesuit, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh wait,
Jesuits in there.
I think so.
Let's look it up.
I forget. I used to know what order you belonged to.
A Jesuit.
I think so.
Well, the real guys who figured it all out were the Jansenists. Sorry to tell you.
I mean,
Jan Hus?
Right. Better than Molina.
Those are the Hussites.
Still wrong.
The Hussites are fine too.
Yeah.
Yes, Molina was a Jesuit according to a quick AI Google search.
Yeah.
All right.
Jesuits and their tricks.
They're always. All right. While you're pulling that up, I want to play this. We didn't play it earlier, but I think that is emblematic of many of the issues we have seen, and a conclusion that I have kind of come to, where I think Jay Dyer is no longer in the ascendant. I feel like Jay's day in the sun has perhaps is coming to an end. I certainly hope so. I mean, I've always said I get a kick out of Jay, and I still do. But my goodness, he just has.
It's just time.
He's just crapped his pants too many times. So, anyways, this is a brief summation of Jay Dyer's apologetic methodology. For those who couldn't hear, he said, "You're a retard, dude," when a guy offered to shake his hand. And that's at the end of a 10-minute debate. Shirt? Yeah, that's at the end of a 10-minute debate where the guy did a pretty good job, and Jay then proceeded to completely lambast him online afterwards of using AI, using his meta glasses, which the guy takes his glasses off halfway through the debate, so he couldn't have used them the entire time.
Also, meta glasses don't do that.
It would be more impressive in my mind if he was reading off of AI, somehow using AI to aid him in a live debate where he's coming back with rapid answers. I mean,
yeah, honestly, that's
more
impressive.
power to him. That's pretty impressive if he was. And so, I mean, that's a sore loser. I don't even know who won that debate because they're talking about things that it's they're getting into the weeds of the Chieti document and all that stuff, and it's not really my area of expertise. So I don't know who won the debate per se, but Jay is acting like a sore loser, absolutely. So
I think
and the guy
that
certainly
lost
held
the
his
debate.
ground. Well, yeah,
Like, regardless of the points being made, to the audience, that was a losing move.
So that is from the 1v5 from the debate con that was recently released, and you knew it was going to be bad because Jay was putting out all kinds of tweets on X saying that, hey guys, they said it was going to, like, they said everyone agreed that it's just blood sports and we can call each other names and we can be really vile, and so I'm freaking out a little bit, but when you see it, like, just know that that's the context, and it's like, so you knew it was going to be bad.
Okay.
Lots of protesting beforehand.
Was
Anyway,
that
that's
the
out now.
same shirt as the clip we watched?
I think he only has like 5 shirts. I only have like 5 shirts that I wear, so it's okay. This right here is a Jay Drip shirt. I had it before I ever saw a Jay clip, but it is funny. He has one that looks exactly the same. He just does not have a collar.
Nothing at all wrong with wine shirts.
Yeah, exactly.
As a libertarian, I'm perfectly fine with wine shirts.
There you go. Oh, you're a libertarian? Get out.
Yeah, you know
Can I
this?
kick Professor?
John didn't warn you?
I just told him you were Catholic.
I'm an anarchist.
That's okay.
What
That's
is
cute.
this
I used to be a
anyway?
libertarian.
Oh.
All right, guys. Well, we've been going for 3 hours, over 3 hours, and even though it's 12 here and I still got several hours, the night is
I don't
young
know how
for
you do
me.
it.
John
Do you
and
have, like,
Professor
a-
McCoy
do you
have an
have,
early
like, a-
bedtime.
I actually don't tonight, but
Oh, well, good for you.
I get up at 5.
I don't
Yeah,
tomorrow.
well, that's probably it. I work for myself, and I can get up whenever I want as long as it's
I
before
wish
9:30.
I'm trying to get to a point where I can do that because like getting up at 5 actually sucks. I mean,
Everyone support John's sportswear brand. He's got cool stuff.
to hold off on that. Our website's not working right, but it will also
Get your
take
shit
your
together,
money.
man. So
I'm
people
trying.
can throw money at you.
Genuinely trying.
We'll
It's
plug
really
you once you got
difficult.
it all together.
Yeah.
There's a lot more going on to it that's difficult. I'm trying.
Wear your shirts
yeah.
on stream. Let me know when I can buy one.
I'm wearing a shirt on stream and a hat.
Thank you for wearing a shirt on stream, John. We would prefer that. All right. Thank you all for being here, guys. We appreciate you. We appreciate your support. We appreciate your super chats. Let me do a quick review to make sure we got everything. I think we did read all the super chats. Yes, we did. Let me just do a quick check of Ko-Fi to make sure that we didn't get anything that I missed. Let's see. I think we're all set. So I apologize if we missed anything. If we did, we'll read it on the next stream. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for your support and engagement. This has been a good stream. We will be here next week. I think we've got a guest next week. I think it's another Catholic. I won't say it now just because we've had one person back out. So I don't want to announce it ahead of time. But I think we've got a more Thomistic guest next week as well. So looking forward to that. And Professor McCoy, thank you for being here. John, thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure. All right, guys. God bless. Have a good night.
God bless.